we're going to call this meeting to order. We're going to go around the room introducing folks at the advisory council table and staff, starting with Brian first, then we'll go out to those of you in the public that have joined us here in person. And then we will ask the folks who are joining us online to please introduce themselves. Brian, would you start off the introductions?
I'm Brian Bartkowiak with the Natural Resource Damage Program. And Doug will introduce himself in a second, but this is the first meeting that he's been a participant at since 2014, I believe. And he wanted me to reassure everybody that he is still here and available. And at least as much as he's told me, he is not going anywhere anytime soon. So, Brian Bartkowiak, the Resource Damage Program.
Brian, I'm Kristie Beal. I'm from Missoula and part of the advisory council. And also wanted to let folks know that we have learned that the governor has reappointed the advisory council through September of 2027.
Correct.
And we have two new advisory council members we'd love to welcome. And they are next up, Andy Fisher and Maureen Connor. If you will please introduce yourselves to everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Andy Fisher, I'm one of the newest members appointed here, and I live in Deer Lodge. Been here for about 11 years with my family. Originally from Missoula. In my professional capacity, I do work for the Clark Fork Coalition and have worked alongside the damage program on many projects over the years up here. Yeah, just excited to be on board and contribute to this, and looking forward to it.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone out there. I'm Maureen Connor and I live near Phillipsburg, and I am a former member of the council, so I have some catch up to do. So if I ask annoying questions, well. And I am currently working part-time on some infrastructure problems for this town of Phillipsburg.
Welcome.
And I'm Marjorie Christensen. I live in Fairmont, but we have a ranch in the Big Hole on the Deer Lodge County and Beaver County. And we have a family, two sons that ranch with us, one in Dillon and one is in the Big Hole part of the time. And so I'm kind of looking out for the ranchers.
Good afternoon, I'm Bill Schwenk. I'm with the Department of Fish, Wildlife and Parks. I manage their land and water program.
To start, Confederate Salish and Kootenai Tribes, I'm the staff scientist with the legal department.
Rick Ringsock, I'm from Butte, I'm a retired business owner.
Is it?
You're more than that. Steve Hill from Anaconda, I own Cummins Portal Hospital. I'm a retired geologist and did a lot of environmental restoration work in my previous life.
We start back there with you, Miranda.
Oh, sure. Miranda, NRDP. I've been supervisor doing potential.
And yes, we'll start with you, Doug.
Doug Martin, Natural Resource Damage Program.
Brad Lerman, the Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and the fish biologist in Rock Creek, Lake Creek.
Sir, next one, over. Yes, you.
Carl Handing, planning director for Independent Deer Lodge County.
Hi, Allie Curtis. I'm the Instream flow specialist with Trout Unlimited.
Thomas Sutton, I'm the new-ish Deer Lodge area wildlife biologist with FWP. And I'll apologize ahead of time, I have to leave a little after 3 for season setting meeting.
Alyssa Sorenson, I'm with the Legislative Audit Division.
Pat Sample, Fish, Wildlife and Parks, I'm a fisheries manager out of Missoula. Fluids Department.
Caleb Erling, I'm a fish biologist with Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and operator of Aquatic.
Nathan Cook, NRDP, environmental scientist.
Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program.
All right, and could those of you who are online with us, please introduce yourselves.
Everyone,
If anyone-
Catherine Houserath with NRDP.
Andrew Pfeiffer, NRDP.
This is Kristie Yeager with FWP.
Aspen Ward with NRDP.
Valerie Kurth, Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation.
Stephanie Espinoza, Watershed Coordinator with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes.
Jody Unruh, NRDP Admin.
There's also Mike Smith.
Mr. Smith, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. I'm Mike Smith. I'm with the Montana Standard.
Thank you very much. If anyone joins from Miranda, will let us know and we'll have them introduce themselves as well. With that, we will. So we have, on the screen, you can see that we have some information about the meeting. It's a hybrid meeting. It is being recorded. All of the advisory council members or members of the public who are going to be making a comment, if you will please allow me to recognize you, if you'll state your name, if you've raised your hand, Miranda will signal to me that there's somebody that's raised their hand and wants to make a comment. Otherwise, if you will we're going to try to make sure that everybody's voices get heard, but we're also going to try not to have the meeting go into the long hours like we have had happen before. We want to make sure everybody gets heard, but if you'll just ask for recognition, I'll state your name or I'll have you state your name, and then we'll have you make your comment or ask your question. All participants should announce their names before they're speaking every time, because the recording can't hear. It's just taking down words. So if the person, if you speak and then someone else speaks, please reintroduce yourself. And I'll probably be the one who forgets that, so Andy's gonna kick. All right. With that, I will turn it over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program. Thank you all for coming today. Thanks to the council, especially Steve, for submitting questions to us. The way I set up this agenda, we asked Alyssa with the audit division to give us a brief update of the audit of NRDP. Miranda's going to give us our financial update. We're going to briefly go through our aquatic, terrestrial, and restoration plan updates. All that information is in your packet. We're only going to highlight a few projects, but feel free to ask questions about all of our projects. We'll have a little break, and then the meat of this meeting, I really want to get into a discussion of Silver Lake flow release from this year. I want to highlight Ray Vinkey with our program is going to highlight some of the projects that have been done and are currently underway on Warm Springs Creek. Talk about the Blacktail Creek project, and again, we have Caleb here to talk about some of the resource benefits. I'm sorry, Steve, but we're not going to be answer all your questions, but we hope that we will be able to show you the data we have and the benefits of that project. And then continue the discussion that's been kind of going on since the last revision of the priority areas and priority actions. And again, we have Brad and Pat and Caleb here from the fisheries perspective for those projects. And with that, I think I will ask Alyssa to give us a little update of the audit of NRDP.
Am I in okay place, or should I?
If you don't want to.
We have a mic back there, so I don't, I'm not sure if it matters.
As long as you're at a mic.
There's a mic right on that table.
All right. The
Yeah, you can sit right
little
there.
grade,
Fine.
sit right here.
Okay, Steve, you have a question?
Can I ask a question before we get started?
Yes.
Can we get a transcription of the meetings of this meeting or access to the recorded version so we have a record?
Yeah.
I know I've had to ask you
Mm-hmm.
that Past and other.
Brian, go ahead.
Oh, this is Brian, yes, and Steve asked if we can get a recording. I don't remember, do we post these on our website? We do post these on our website. I don't think we post the transcriptions, but they're the teams meetings and you can flip through them and fast forward and remember. And I think, I'll have to, if Jody's there, maybe she can confirm, all of our previous meetings should be online.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes. Yes, all of our meetings are accessible.
Is that Jody speaking?
Yes, this is Jody. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
And,
That's Steve now.
and
Now it's Brian, but
And-
got to introduce yourselves or you're not talking. I'm gonna have to play hardball.
okay, and to play hardball, this is Brian. We had a new participant. Amanda, would you care to introduce yourself?
I am the planning director for Powell County.
Thank you, Amanda. All right.
All right,
Brian.
Alyssa, you're up.
All right, this is Alyssa Sorenson. I am with Montana Legislative Audit Division. As I mentioned, we are currently working on a performance audit of natural resource damage program. I think everyone is aware here on the Police and Council that is happening, but I'm here to tell you a little bit more about what we're up to. So we ended up with 3 objectives. The first one is to provide a comprehensive overview of Montana's natural resource damage claims, including claim status, progress, and timelines, financial overview, key restoration outcomes, and major challenges to completion. The second objective is to determine if the natural resource damage program integrates public management and natural resource restoration best practices to guide effective and efficient restoration. And third is to determine if state natural resource damage settlement funds are spent in accordance with legal requirements. So it's kind of a big, broad fight. To do that, we've scoped it somewhat here to include the current status and history of Montana's natural resource damage claims, current program management practices. We're going to look at both new and settled claims, and we'll be conducting a compliance review of recent and then fiscal year 2024 and 2025 claim expenses. This would include contracts, task orders, and administrative allocations. And to do that, we have some methods that we've set up to do. One is interviewing program management and staff. We'll also be interviewing other state and federal agencies that have a similar mission. We're going to survey you all, both advisory councils. And we will be conducting a survey of interested members of the public and doing interviews with contractors and other stakeholders who interact with natural resource damage in other ways, and other agency folks as well who interact with natural resource damage. We're going to review program policy and procedures, review claim records, collect and analyze program and claim savers and Board of Investments financial data, and then review that fiscal year 2024 and 2025 financial activity. This is the large picture here about what's going on.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Madam Chairman, Maureen Connor, Alyssa, who called for this performance audit?
Yes, so in my part of the division, we get topics from a number of different places. In this case, it was kind of an interesting one where we had a legislative request some years ago, actually, that had some questions about East Helena's site. And out of that, we're like, this couldn't really get that far into it with the resources for legislative requests. So we said, this might be a good topic to consider more fully at another date. And so we, as an office, wrote up a very basic description of what we might do if we were to do a natural resource damage program audit. And we put that forth to the Legislative Audit Committee, which is bicameral and bipartisan, split down the middle. And they prioritized it along with, 20 something other topics we gave them. This was one of the choices.
Maureen Connor, another question, when you can be done?
Yeah. This is Alyssa. I think our original timeline was to be complete by June of next year with a report to the Legislative Audit Committee. However, our committee date is very close to when the no other issues or delays date was. So I expect we'll probably be in the next legislative audit committee, which would be, I think, September next year.
Kristie Beal, September 2026.
Mhm.
And this is Kristie Beal, can you share with us the, if there are phases of your audit, what phase you're in?
Well, so our phases are pretty big. We already did assessment. That's where we just get a basic idea of how things work, and where potential areas of interest might be. Then we plan, and that's where we lay out these steps that we're gonna take. We have much more detail in our internal document. We do have one that we've given to the legislative audit committee that I give copies of. And then after planning, we do field work, and that we actually do all of those things. So, it's not that we do objective 1 and then objective 2 and then objective 3. There's a lot of overlap in the methods for these different objectives, so they're kind of moving concurrently. And then report writing will start probably spring next year, and that process takes some time and includes feedback from the program as well before it's published.
Okay. Kristie Beal, sir, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes.
If a new person joined us.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late. Benjamin Laporte. I'm the Tribal Limited.
Thank you. Maureen.
Maureen Connor, this is a comment for the council, if I'm kind of familiar with this stuff. I just wanted to say, this is a big deal. This is beyond an audit, which is the, does the math work good? Okay, this is very detailed, and she said it, but I don't know if everybody caught it, but this is a really big deal. Performance audits are huge, so for the state.
And do any of the other advisory council members have questions or comments? Steve Hill.
Steve Hill, Anaconda. Does this council get any bids routinely on this?
And Mrs. Alyssa, we actually have to first report to the legislative audit committee before we do any other public announcements of anything. So not in that way. We will, however, be sending out that survey to make sure that you all have the chance to provide some input on some areas you think are relevant to your scope of work with natural resource damage. So in that case, we'll at least get your input, but unfortunately, we try to keep the working efforts moving along behind the scenes until we can get to the committee who we report to. But after that, I'm happy to discuss the results at a later date.
Thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, Bill Shank, Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Does the audit, once complete, does it come with recommendations?
This is Alyssa. Yeah. So the report, I guess I don't know for certain. We have to have findings, have recommendations. But typically a performance audit would have a recommendation. Sometimes those are to the agency, the program, sometimes they're to the legislature for if it's a statutory situation.
Chris
Doug, CSKT. Will this committee or anybody get some sort of preamble as to what you just said in writing so we can follow the bouncing ball as it goes down? Or not?
So at the end, we have a report that is published.
Early on.
No, earlier on, I will be reporting to the program staff where I'm at, and we will have periodic meetings to discuss the results, but that is the extent of our update at this time that we plan to do.
And if I can clarify,
Brian,
NRDP, basically. I believe you have a handout that has the kind of the scope of the audit, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Chris Doug, CSKT. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
this is Kristie Beal. Is this a good time for that handout? While she's gathering those, Doug is being awfully kind to offer to pass those out. Do any of the public, present here or online have any questions or comments? This is Kristie. Miranda, do you see any? Miranda's shaking her head no. Okay. Yes, Maureen.
Maureen Connor, this, Madam Chairman, I think this is for Doug, because I think he's old enough to remember this. It seems like there was just a regular audit, not a performance audit, somewhere around 08, something like that. Is that ringing any bells?
This is Doug Martin. Yeah, we have financial audits, very frequently, and quite often. So, this is a different audit because of the performance, but our financial case gets audited. Both by both DOJ and.
This is Alyssa. I'll add that I know my function in the electrical audit division did years ago, and I don't know exactly the date. Kind of an unusual product where we provided an overview or update of, I think the Upper Clark Court claims specifically, but it wasn't a traditional audit where we had findings or we were just trying to report and a high level of, well, more actually the process that the claim had gone through. And it was a long time ago.
Yeah,
But that's the one I know of.
I'm old, and that's, I think.
That's Maureen speaking.
Yeah.
Don't like your comments tied to all of us. The old part. Oh, it's here for me too. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Christine? Chris?
Chris Dark, CSKT. Is there any relationship that you're aware of betwixt this audit and documents that came to light, at least to my light, in the last 6 months or so? There's the Ford memo, or whatever you want to call it. There's the Steep Hill concerns. And there's the Beal project for the golf course, which seems to be inflammatory of some state. There's, including political favorites and like that. Does that have something to do with why you're here doing this audit? Anything to do with it, I should say.
This is Alyssa. Actually, we started the initial scoping a long time ago. I'm a little embarrassed to say, probably 9 months ago. And this was prioritized fiscal year 20, like the year prior. So we have a long process to get things moving along. So these are items that have been provided to us, but we are not, that is not what triggered the audit.
All right, if there are no other questions, comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Alyssa. Christie.
Okay, next up, we'll have, Brian. Next up will be, we'll have, Miranda with our financial updates.
So Miranda, NRDP, I realized I forgot the paper, sorry, 1 second. So, everybody should have in their packet, a detailed description. We've kind of had these regular questions on some of like the definitions and everything. So in your packet, you've got a couple page sheet that has all of those definitions. If you have any questions on those, I can go through that. We won't be going through those in detail on these slides. So the Upper Clark River Basin, as you guys know, we have these main categories. Beal groundwater, we did see the parrot excess come back this fiscal year, so 337,000 of that came back specifically to Beal groundwater. As you guys have seen in previous years, this category itself has been cash negative for a few years. That's now brings that total to 335,000. And we are anticipating that the Blacktail remainders will cover the rest of that. So looking at the aquatics category, 1.7 million in interest earned this fiscal year, essentially 2.2 million in direct expenses, 221,000 in general expenses, revenues and liabilities. That category also saw 1.2 million back from the parent. And for the last plan revision, we moved 2.5 million out of this category. You'll see on the next slide, it's been moved over to the encumbered funds for the Greenway project. That leaves this category with 35.6 million. For terrestrial, just under 160,000 in interest, 287,000 in direct expenses, 21,000 in general expenses, revenues and liabilities, leaving the balance of 3.3 million. Then we have the aquatic reserve, 665,000 in interest earned, leaving a balance of 14.1 million. And then the terrestrial reserve, 284,000 interest with a balance of 6 million. That leaves the total in these categories, 2.8 million in interest earned, 2.5 million in expenses, 242 essentially thousand in general expenses, revenues and liabilities, and a total of 58.7 million. And then we have the other encumbered funds categories. That's the grants, 1.6 million. The Dutchman or wetlands, that's 500,000. Milltown, 40,000. That Greenway that was moved over from the aquatics at 2.5 million. With the total encumbered funds of 5 million, leaving the fund total at 63.7 million, just over. And then these are some of the other funds that NRDP manages. We have viewed area 1, which has a balance of 5.6 million. That also saw some return from the parent. Bartkowiak with 24.2 million. The Smelter Hill Uplands with 8.6 million. Parrot, which is now at 463,000 with that transfer from back to the other funds taken out, and the seafood program at 1.1. And then you also have in your packet a table 6-1. I can take questions on that, but we didn't put that as part of the present.
This is Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program. Miranda, you sent out an update of one of these tables. Can you tell
Oh,
us
yes,
what,
I did. So we realized when I was working on the presentation that we had inadvertently left off the 2.2 million that was coming back from the parent for the aquatics. We just hadn't put that number in at all. So we sent out an updated spreadsheet that had that number included.
So for the
Brian.
NRDP, so for the council, the packet you have in front of you is correct.
Okay.
The packet that is online on our website now is correct. The packet that I sent out about 2 weeks ago has the end balance was correct. It just didn't show the amount in that column.
Kristie Beal, thank you. You want to take questions on this right now? Does the advisory council have any questions on the information that's been presented thus far? Steve Hill.
Steve Hill, Mechanic Audit. So you went through and identified what was left over from the parent. But it was, not identified on these sheets as that was left over from the parent. And I wasn't able to follow where it's included in the table.
Oh.
In each one.
It is this line here, this direct revenue.
This is Miranda speaking.
Oh, sorry, yes.
You're on the fiscal year 2013 through fiscal year 2025 sheet.
Correct.
Kristie Beal.
For the upper part.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that's not only just parrot returns, but these two the categories for butte, groundwater and aquatics is just the parrot. The terrestrial, that's a different revenue from the ranch sale and some leasing revenue that were previous years, not this fiscal year. So that's not just the parrot return in that line.
Andy Fisher, so the 2.2, how is that split between the different categories of aquatics, terrestrial, in that, like 2013 to 2025? What you were describing, right?
The 1.2,
Or sorry, what was it, 1.2?
1.2
Okay.
came back from parrot, is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, correct. That
I
was-
think Brian can maybe answer that better.
I am going, this Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program, I'm going to try to answer that, and then I'm gonna look at Doug to make sure I'm right. I believe the money was only transported out of the Upper Clark Fork Aquatics to the parrot. And the money came back from the parrot, the Upper Clark Fork Aquatics. So there shouldn't be a split with aquatics and terrestrial. No.
This is Doug with the NRDP. So the funding to the parrot from the Upper Clark Fork River Basin came from two spots. One, it came from the streamside tailings operable unit leftovers. In 2016, 16.5 million was transferred to the Upper Clark Fork per the process plan. So that money was to be spent just upstream of Deer Lodge. Those funds were allocated, in that entire $16.5 million was allocated to the parrot. So that money came back as those SST funds. And yes, they went to the aquatics. There is a split to terrestrial as well. But also funding for the parrot also came out of the Beal groundwater. And that's the $5.2 million. That will be, once DEQ finishes the Blacktail Creek project, the additional money will come back to all of the funds. And it's estimated to be somewhere between $8 and $12 million that may come back. When that comes back, we do not know. DEQ needs to finish the Blacktail Creek project, but their schedule is dependent on Atlantic Ridgefield completing other projects in the corridor prior to DEQ completing that one. So it could be anywhere from 3 to 5 years before those funds could be available. Or longer.
Thanks.
Any additional questions? The advisory council? Any questions or comments from the public on this? Being done here in person, any on the, oh, okay. Oh, Jordan was the agent.
I haven't seen anybody with a hand up. Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program.
All right, this is Kristie Missoula, Kristie Beal Missoula. If there are no additional questions and comments on this part of the presentation, we will move to the next portion.
Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program. As I started by saying, we're gonna quickly go through our updates. There is detailed information on all of our projects, both in the tables and in the updates. I think I get to say this every year, but we couldn't do this work alone. We work with a lot of project partners, Clark Fork Coalition, Trout Unlimited, WRC, our sister agencies, the state, federal agencies, local counties. As I've said a lot, we are a fairly small program in a very large state. We have projects from Libby all the way to Glendive, so if it wasn't for our project partners, we wouldn't be able to nearly do as much work as we can. So thank you all. I'm gonna give the aquatic update and then we'll go, look at, Ray to give the terrestrial and the recreation. If you have a clarifying question about what I'm talking about, please ask it. But if you have, bigger questions, let's save them to the question period at the end. I would like to spend a minute on our goals. We put the slide up every year and we, usually we talk about our goals, but I think this year I'm going to read them word for word because I think it's important. I think it's going to lead into the discussion at the end. So our goals are, for the aquatics portion, are to restore the main stem trout fishery by improving recruitment of fish from the tributaries. Number 2, replace lost trout angling in the main stem by improving trout populations in the tributaries. And 3, maintain or improve native trout populations in the upper Clark Fork River Basin to preserve rare and diverse gene pools and improve the diversity and resiliency of the trout fishery. I'll start with our flow projects, just kind of the recap. Our highest priority for flow is in the main stem Clark Fork, basically between Galen and here. Second in priority are projects in priority 1 or priority 2 tributaries, and I'll define those in a second, within the injured area. And third in priority are projects in priority 2 tributaries outside of the injured area. The projects I'd like to highlight this year are Silver Lake, and I'll be talking about that in more detail after the break. We do have a project in coordination with Watershed Restoration Coalition, the Clark Fork Coalition. It's, if you remember, we helped purchase a water right on Racetrack Lake. For those who've been to Racetrack Lake, it's probably about a 6-hour round trip from here. And so part of that water right is managed for in-stream flow. So right now, the water commissioner leaves Deer Lodge, drives all the way up to Georgetown, goes some pretty heinous roads to open a head gate, drives all the way back down to Deer Lodge, checks the flows, waits for the flows to drop, and repeats the process again and again and again until the stored water volume is gone. This project is a Bureau Reclamation grant to automate that head gate. And so theoretically, you should be able to sit here in Deer Lodge and control that head gate. So if it rains, right now, if it rains, that head gate's open. If it stops raining, that head gate's still open. So you should be able to sit here and actually help us maintain the delivery of that water more efficiently. We also have a really cool project in development on what we're calling the Broken Circle Spring. This is a project that was actually brought to us by a landowner, FWP, and has looked at this. And this is a cold water spring that has good potential to provide cold water refuge for trout and also spawning area for trout. We've just did a engineering selection and awarded a contract to look at some of the options for improving this spring. Right now it goes through their corrals and provides stock water and is also a complete passage barrier. So that's a very exciting project in development. And then the other thing I would like to highlight is the Upper Stream Flow Working Group. This is a very collaborative group that we've had some very difficult conversations about water and water management in the Upper Clark Fork. This is a great group for bringing stream flow problems to solve multiple needs such as irrigation and stream flow together. The Watershed Restoration Coalition got another Bureau of Rec grant, and as of this year, this group has been completely funded through the Bureau of Rec grant. So a very collaborative group. If anybody's interested in it, please get a hold of me and we'll put you in contact with it. I think actually the next meeting is next week, Wednesday. We went over the community center, but Wednesday in Deer Lodge, 10 o'clock if anybody is interested. We do have a lot more information on our website on flow projects. We have all the 2024 reports and previous ones up there. As soon as the 2025 flow reports are done, we'll get those up there as well. Moving into the non-flow or aquatic projects. Here's a map of our priority tributaries. The dark blue are the priority 1 stream areas. That includes Basin Creek, German Gulch, Browns Gulch, Warm Springs Creek, Racetrack Creek, and the Little Blackfoot. And then the priority 2 stream areas are shown in light blue. The priority actions listed in our restoration plan to achieve our goals are flow augmentation, fish passage, so allowing fish to move upstream and downstream, fish entrainment reduction or preventing fish from getting stuck in irrigation ditches, and then riparian protection and improvement and in-stream habitat improvement. Again, I'm just highlighting a few projects here. The big one that we have plans for in 2026 has been a very collaborative effort between Trout Unlimited, Natural Resource Data Program, and the Clark Fork Coalition. For those who were here in the spring for our meeting, we went out and looked at the Sagar Lane diversion. Next up is the Coors Manning diversion, which is literally a stone's throw that way, right in Deer Lodge. As you can see from the picture, it's an old rubble diversion. The plan is to completely rebuild this diversion with a fish screen. The other thing you can't see from this picture is the irrigation ditch itself actually crosses the bottom of Cottonwood Creek and is a complete passage barrier for basically the entire season. So the other part of this project is separating irrigation water from Cottonwood Creek. Again, a very collaborative effort. I do have to say, and Ben with Trout Unlimited can probably verify, this is going to be a permitting nightmare. Pretty much every permitting problem is going to be encountered on this project, from working with the Park Service to, and I'm looking at Amanda here, we're going to have a rise on the main stem diversion. We're going to have a rise in flood elevation on Cottonwood Creek. We're going to have wetland impacts, but we are moving ahead through the permitting process with the goal of constructing this project this time next year. Another project that's in development, and Andrew Pfeiffer, he's a new employee with the Natural Resource Data Program, started over the summer. He wasn't able to be here today, but he is leading the effort to look at improving riparian habitat on the Durant Canyon of Silverbow Creek. If the advisory council remembers, I think it was 2 summers ago, we did a field trip down there. We walked the Greenway Trail and we looked out over the floodplain, and there was a fantastic remediation job, but it is not providing the shade and habitat for a functioning floodplain. So he's looking at basically a range of options. What's the biggest bang for our buck to get improved habitat in that section? I'll be talking about Blacktail Creek in more detail later on. Nathan's been working on optimizing the Allendale fish screen, both for the DNRC diversion or the Allendale diversion, but also for the private users. Nathan and TU are just finishing up the Flint Creek 3.8 project, which is a riparian habitat project. This project the design has been funded by the Natural Resource Damage Program. The construction has been funded entirely by Trout Unlimited. Andrew, again, and thanks to our project partners, TU and WRC, we've really started to make some headway of getting some projects developed on the Little Blackfoot. The one that is most furthest along is a fish screen on a major diversion on the Cross Canyon Ranch. Again, if the council remembers, we've been having a hard time getting projects started on the Little Blackfoot, so this has been a good initiative to actually get some work started on that priority one tributary. Nathan has been working closely, Nathan with our program has been working very closely with the Mill Creek Irrigation District, or is it the Opportunity Irrigation District? I can never remember, but we're looking at installing 2 fish screens on the lower part of Mill Creek as well, which are also priority areas. Nathan also is working on a very, very cool project on Lower Racetrack Creek. This is a spawning area for brown trout. We're looking at improving that and improving fish populations to the main stem. And then Ray with our program is going to go into detail on Warm Springs Creek projects. Again, pictures worth 1,000 words. This is the irrigation diversion we saw after our meeting in the spring at Sagar Lane. So on the left, before the diversion, before the project started, you can see how that would be a passage barrier to fish. On the right, believe it or not, and that arrow is in the same place, is the same diversion that is providing fish passage and also irrigation water at the same time. Again, unless you have a clarifying question, I'm going to pass it over to Ray and we'll take questions on our overall update after the terrestrial and rec. Don't forget to say your name, Chris.
Good afternoon. I'm Ray Vinkey with the Natural Resource Damage Program. Okay. And yeah, I'll just be providing you with some brief updates on accomplishments in 2025 with the Natural Resource Damage Program completed with our partners. I also always like to mention that all of our work within the program is product of teamwork. And none of the scientists would be able to work alone without the support of administrative staff, managers, and of course our legal staff, without whom's work the program would even be funded. So, with that. So just like aquatics, all of our work, our actions in the terrestrial elements of the program are guided by restoration plans. Initially, the Natural Resource Damage Program with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and some other projects developed a terrestrial resource prioritization plan that prioritized landscapes for conservation and enhancement actions based on existing habitat, wildlife populations, protections, and opportunity. That prioritization plan drove the restoration plans, which were published in 2012, was it, the initial ones, and then have had several subsequent amendments. We have 8 landscapes where we focus work in the Upper Clark Fork, and all riparian areas as well are prioritized for restoration funding. But we have the basin writ large is over 2 million acres, so we saw the need to focus our work in these 8 landscapes. All right, so briefly, our primary terrestrial actions are to protect high priority lands. This falls within the replacement category of our actions. We do that through securing public property for public acquisitions of property. NRD has supported multiple acquisitions of lands that have been incorporated into Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, WMAs, or in some cases before the restoration plans actually do grant funds purchased in entirety. Some wildlife management areas, Garrity Wildlife Management Area west of Anaconda, and Spot Dog Nares, Deer Lodge are examples of that. We've also supported the purchase of multiple conservation easements in the watershed. And currently, most of our work is focused on habitat enhancement projects. We try to work in habitats which have a disproportionate value relative to their size in the landscape. That includes riparian wetlands, of course, as well as grassland, shrub grasslands, and some forest types. All right, so we've done habitat enhancement projects all the way from Phillipsburg west, close to Butte on your, I can use my pointer here. But anyway, several projects recently completed west of Phillipsburg, as well as we're currently working on 2 projects on the Hollenbeck Ranch and the NRC section of Brock Creek. And we completed numerous projects close to Butte and south of Deer Lodge. These are projects that are highly cooperative, working with private landowners as well as state partners. And this year, actually just yesterday, we received bids to do conifer removal from shrub grasslands and aspen stands on both the Hollenbeck Ranch and here and DNRC property. And what we're trying to address in these cases are conifer encroachment into grasslands and aspen stands, which are crowding out native habitats with high value for wildlife. We did, in cooperation with Watershed Restoration Coalition, do monitoring of a number of projects that were completed in the past. And what we found was that in terms of both beaver dam analogs and the removal of conifers from aspen stands have been highly successful in improving wildlife habitat. One thing that we're learning, I'd say we're probably in the third or fourth generation now working on beaver dam analogs, is that it's really important that they be placed at appropriate sites, which are, largely places where beavers would have built dams. So streams that are not very steep, where you have a high degree of just essentially slow water that have adjacency to willows and other, feed that beavers would select for. So then this year, we're just about to award bids for this work that's going to occur in the gardens. That was the focus of our effort for enhancement. The Clark Fork River Ranch, I believe we've talked about this property a number of times in the past, but just as a refresher, it's 2,600 acres that are owned by the state of Montana in the Deer Lodge area. This is kind of a unique property and suits multiple needs of the state of Montana. It allows us to, ownership of this property will allow for integrated remediation and restoration along the Clark Fork River Ranch. That's because there's significant stream mileage that goes through this ranch. We're going to start sampling in 2026 and planning the removal of contaminated soils in subsequent years. Also, ownership of this ranch serves to replace lost grassland habitat as well as riparian habitats. Notably, this is the center of antelope distribution in the Upper Clark Fork. Just an aside, I went out on opening day, figured I'd look for some deer here, and I found nothing but antelope all over the place. So it's kind of unique. There's not a lot of antelope in the Upper Clark Fork. The Clark Fork River Ranch is leased to a neighboring ranch, the Graco Family Limited Partnership. And in doing so, the Gracos basically pay our property as well as raise cattle on it. And in exchange for leaving water in the river, acquiring their right to withdraw water from the river in late summer when water isn't been most in the river. So ownership of this ranch enables us to work with Gracos to keep water in the river, as well as just upstream the Broken Sword Ranch. The Sauger Lane, the Clark Fork River Ranch is also known as the Sauger Lane Block Management Area because it adjoins Sauger Lane. It provided 400 hunter days in 2024. And again, it's most likely there wouldn't have been that hunter opportunity if it weren't for state ownership of that property. In 2025, we were quite active working on the Clark Fork River Ranch. We completed a management plan, which is going to guide its future use. Executed a 20-year lease with the adjoining property owner, again, the Graco family. That lease governs the terms of the split season water lease, as well as grazing that will occur on the property in May. We also are developing the water development on the property, which is going to enable essentially joint management of the two properties, the neighbor, the lessee's property, and NRD's property, again, to facilitate the split season lease. We repaired a well this year. Yeah, the lessee constructed 4,000 feet of fence in the lower pasture, and we've been monitoring grazing on that property. So again, Clark Fork River Ranch has multiple benefits, but in this point this year, we've really been focused on working with our lessee to essentially co-manage the property. All right, so conservation easements, the NRD has paid for 4 different conservation easements since the restoration funds or since restoration plans were approved. They're west, in the northwest corner of the watershed at the Bucksbaum property. The Gravely conservation easement north of North Garrison, Clark Fork River Ranch, as well as the Dry Concord conservation easement. Those properties essentially work to protect from development up to approximately 13,000 acres in the outer Clark Fork River Basin. They provided those properties and adjoining ranches approximately 3,700 hunter days in 2024. Five Valleys Land Trust holds a number of those easements and worked with us to monitor those properties in this year. And they found that matching all the properties remains consistent with the terms of the easements. So also just quickly to highlight, since the restoration plans were approved, NRD has paid for 3 additions to the Garrity Wildlife Management Area. The Garrity Wildlife Management Area is actually a really important program. It's one of the first very significant lands purchases that NRD accomplished in 2001. It was facilitated by the Rocky Mountain Belt Foundation. The WMA is now 9,000 acres. All right, so that's it for terrestrial. I've got a brief update on 2025 highlights for recreation projects. So we're going to talk about fishing access site, Milltown State Park, the Greenway, as well as Powell County, Tri-County Trail System. So Fish, Wildlife and Parks managed and monitored actually over 100,000 visitor days in on Milltown, which is very significant. We also relocated the Bluff Overlook to a safe area using already elevated.
This is Kristie Beal. Hang on one second. You've got a clarification question?
Oh, sorry, Doug, that's what you were trying to.
Make ring shot view,
Yeah,
like your previous flag, well,
sure.
many others. On
This
the
one?
Spencer, the Upper Willow Creek, as well as the heat on Bucksbaum. That's all outside the injured area. How did we do that?
This guy and this guy. So, yeah,
Bucksbaum, not.
yeah, Bucksbaum here near Maxville and Great Lakes.
The other two right were Spencer and Willow Creek, which were up by Maxville.
So Spencer and Willow Creek, we have done some enhancement projects there, fisheries projects. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's outside the injured area.
Yeah, they're.
Is that a Trout Unlimited project or?
Spencer, I'm actually not sure of the history. There may be others in the room who know that. I'm sorry, I think. But they are all within the Upper Clark Fork River Basin, for which, of course, we have a settlement, you know.
Yeah, but in the settlement, anything, remembering side, anything from Garrison is not considered an inflowing stream for the consent decree in the injured area. The inflowing streams that are considered are only those streams that are above Garrison. The ones below it to include Rock Creek and Flint Creek.
This is Kristie Beal. I'm going to interrupt a second here, Vic. Let's finish the updates and then we have some time allocated for broader questions.
Yeah.
So if we have questions, clarification questions about what they're reporting to us, let's go over those now. But if we have broader questions, let's leave those until we get done with the updates, please.
Okay.
Please keep your question, though. Let's come back to it.
Yeah, thank you, Mick. And yeah, we will address those questions. All right, so again, Fish, Wildlife and Parks has really been managing an extraordinary number of visitors to Milltown. Also in 2025, we began characterization of contaminants at the Coors Bend fishing access site. We anticipate construction of removal of those materials in 2026. For the Greenway Service District, no construction occurred in 2025. They have continued planning, design, and negotiations with the railroad. NRD is working with the Greenway Service District on the new contract and task orders for allocated funds. I am happy to report, and Amanda is probably the best person to give us detail on this. Amanda with the county. Powell County, after what, a couple years effort, Amanda? Yeah.
2 years failed and right, we succeeded on the third try to get our federal grant.
Yeah.
Can you please state your name?
Yes.
Amanda Cooley.
Yeah, Amanda Cooley from the planning department. But Powell County, yeah, would secured us funding for a tri-county trail system in terms of designing that. And yeah, we look forward to working with them. So, so yeah, I think at this point, we will take questions on all three of these items, both aquatic, terrestrial, and recreation projects updates. And then just to reinforce, we're talking about Upper Clark Fork River Basin settlement, the purpose of that guides expenditure of these funds.
Pickering second.
Okay.
For some reason I missed when we gave money to the Upper Willow Creek and Spencer, as well as purchasing the on the Bucks Farm.
Purchasing the easement.
Did we approve spending money outside of the injured area for those projects specifically?
So those projects were certainly Bucksbaum. I'm not as sure about Spencer, and I don't know who wants to take, would be a better fit for that.
This is Nathan. Spencer was a Spring Creek project.
Thank you.
On Spring Creek, it's on my time, I believe it was either a CFC or ERC.
Okay, so did you hear that, Mick? Okay, and then as far as Bucksbaum, that conservation easement north of Maxville, that did come up for the advisory council. So, Doug, is that correct? Just checking. That was not when I was working with the program, but I was tracking that project. So, yeah.
The question I have is, I didn't know about those two, but I'm sure that's about water and the Clarksville relation, Spencer and.
Well, Bucksbaum was largely to secure the conservation.
No, that was it. I thought that the Spencer and the Upper Willow Creek ones.
Yeah.
On the creek, was that about water, even the Clark Fork, because we had talked about limiting the funding to above Garrison.
Yeah, just.
I remember the fish trap one.
Doug,
okay.
Can you answer that? This is Kristen Beal. Doug, please hold.
So this is Doug Martin with the Natural Resource Damage Program. The Upper Willow Creek project was a project that was funded back during the grants program there. I can't tell you the year, but it was, I know it was one of Tom Mosted's first projects, so that was a long time ago. The Spencer project, I recall it, but I can't tell you a lot about that project. I don't recall a lot about that. But all of those projects are within the Upper Clark Fork River Basin. They are all eligible for funding. Most of those projects, for instance, Spencer and the Upper Willow would be considered replacement projects because they are replacing lost resources. As Brian noted in the goals, although the Upper Willow was before we had these specific goals. But the goal is to restore the trunk of the main stem. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, and the term injured, we are actually looking for this the other day. The term injured area is not in the consent decree, not in our restoration plans. It's called injured resources. And so the injured resources are the aquatic and terrestrial resources of the basin. So that's where those projects fit into the funding from the restoration.
Chris, hang on, Kristen Beal. I'm gonna acknowledge Maureen first, and then I'll come back to you again.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Comment for everyone. I guess the way I look at these two projects are, they're kind of in my area. They're kind of legacy projects, okay? They were pre-planned. The Willow Creek one specifically was on a ranch where the rancher came back from the war, straightened the ditch to get it out of his pastures. And now he wishes, well, he's passed away now, but now he wishes that it was meandering. And so for staff, this was Eric.
Yes.
This was Eric's project. And then the one you're calling Spencer is the same way, except it was really little. I mean, it was teeny tiny. It was just to try and get some more cold water into near the end of Flint Creek, but it was teeny, same guy. So I think maybe a good way to look at these is these were pre-planned legacy kind of things, and they're not out of compliance. They're probably ones that would be discussed in with a different lens today. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
I just, you know, I obviously didn't know about this long ago, but we've been stretching the definition of what should and shouldn't be faced, anything below garrison. I don't think qualifies, it's just my own opinion.
And this is Brian with Natural Resource Damage Program. I think this is a great discussion, and I would like to put a pin in this for our last action item. With that being said, our mission is to restore, replace, or acquire the equivalent of the injured resources. And when you think about doing that, I mean, if you think about some of these major oil spills like Deepwater, everyone's heard about Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. They are doing projects from Alaska to these islands thousands of miles away that have nothing to do with the injured area, but injured resources, because the birds that were injured in that spill are nesting in these remote areas. So that's, when you think about our mission, I think it's important to think about the restore, replace, acquire, equivalent. And again, I think this is a very good discussion to move toward the end.
This is Kristie Beal. And so like, it sounds to me like one of the points that we want to add to our, the open discussion and at the end is, what is it that is to be placed, restored? I mean, what is it? Is it an area that is, or is it the resources? That's a good question. We'll come back to. Maureen.
Madam Chairman, great. I think. What the heck with the Greenway? And then second question, Brian. Greenway not participating in anything on the potential restoration in the Rocky Place. It's maybe a little glamorous to call it the Grand Canyon, but.
The Grand Canyon, is that what you're referring to? Just for clarity.
Yeah, Grand. Yes, Brian called it the Grand Canyon.
No, Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program. If I called it the Grand Canyon, I meant to call it Durant.
Okay, maybe I misheard you because
It's definitely not as grand as the Grand Canyon, but it is pretty nice.
It is pretty nice, but yeah. Okay, so I guess question one is, and this might be, Madam Chairman, this might be something for a later date, but what the heck on the Greenway? And I'd really like to know, because they got quite a bit of money a long time ago. I think the fund still holds on to it. And it'd be interesting. I'd really like to see some participation by the Greenway in that with their funds.
Kristie Beal, Missoula, I think the broader discussion of the Greenway is there's that in particular created like a 7.5 hour meeting.
It did?
Yes. So I think we will,
It is recorded. Brian McCrack, Natural Resource Damage Program. If you'd like to listen to all 7 hours, you can listen to it.
So let's put a pin in that. And everybody who has a response to what the heck on the Greenway or Marine, let's think about how we can focus our information so we are not here till 7:30 at night again, please.
Yeah, I think, I was gonna hand that one to Doug anyway. I haven't, Ray Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program. I haven't been actively working on the Greenway, so I was gonna hand that to Doug. So I think it would be appropriate just to table that. give you guys 5 minutes. So.
Doug Martin with the NRDP. Just a quick response to Maureen on the Greenway. I have been working with them, or we have been working with them, and I do know that they are, what has held them up is negotiations with the railroad at this point. They did have they were making progress in in negotiations, and maybe you can have it, was it rarest? The railroad changed hands.
Right.
And so they had to start over again. So that's the biggest thing holding up their movement on the Durant Canyon aspect of it. We have had some discussions, about moving forward with the other portion of the trail and, Anaconda, and I'm not gonna put them on the spot, but I do know, there's other issues that could maybe answered if we could move to that trail for the other guys. Might be. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Have to answer anything? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Carl Handing, Planning Director, Anaconda, Deer Lodge County. Yeah, I think Doug said it well. The Greenway, I am a member of the Greenway Service District. Dory is the program manager, or I'm not exactly sure her title with the Greenway, but it's really her pet project, and she's been working diligently with the railroad for a number of years now. As Doug said, it went from the BA&P to Raris, and then Raris sold to Patriot, and so Patriot Rail, they're based out of Florida, and so it's a little tougher for them to engage in negotiations about their safety concerns for putting the new trail through the remainder of the canyon. So yeah, I think as Doug mentioned, they're looking at other segments of the Greenway that they can implement in the near future while negotiations continue to move forward.
Brian?
Natural Resource Damage Program. And I'd just like to expand on the habitat work on Silver. We have, Andrew has just did an engineering selection to have the consultant look at the range of options. We're not doing that work in a vacuum. We're doing that in coordination with DEQ. Anything that we do in there will be coordinated with the Greenway as well. Of course, the same access issues the Greenway is going to have for public access, we're going to have to work with them to get access for equipment as well. So it's not like we're just picking up this project and doing it in a vacuum.
Does any of the advisory council have questions on the summaries that have been presented at this point with the understanding that the two subjects about the scope of what's included in the plan and what the heck with Greenway will be taken up at the end? Steve Hill.
Question for you, Steve Hill, Anaconda. Question for you, Ray. You're talking about Clark Fork River Range.
Yes.
You mentioned within your discussion removal of soils. Is that part of restoration or is that part of remediation?
Brian's been working extensively with DEQ on the remedial work on the Great Vinkey Natural Resource Damage Program. I'm going to hand this one to Brian, who's been most active.
So Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program. The Clark Fork River Ranch was purchased with both flow dollars and Clark Fork River restoration dollars. The cleanup is being coordinated with DEQ, and that will be Clark Fork River restoration dollars. So unless there's a specific flow component or aquatic component, there will not be any basin dollars in that cleanup.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Andy Fisher, related question on the Clark Fork River area. You kind of mentioned there was a management plan that you guys have enacted or completed, and I was just curious if you could explain a little bit more about who the audience for that is, what components of the the ranch's assets? Does that relate to super fund? Does it relate to recreation and all the other components that are out there?
Yeah, it's, I mean, go ahead, Brian.
Vinkey.
Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program. And yeah, I appreciate the question. That's a guiding document predominantly for the program ourselves. We did develop that as a commitment to the advisory council several years ago. It actually directs all elements of the ranch management, from recreation to the split season lease with the lessee. And sorry, I lost track of your question. What were the other elements?
Did it not super fund at all in the Andy Fisher? Did it involve super fund as well?
We reference relevant. Ray Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program. Thank you, Andy, for your question. We do reference the associated restoration plans, for example, of work that's going to be occurring on the river, but it doesn't, the management plan does not spell out, for example, how the removal of sediments would occur along the river. It's focused on management actions. So that would be our relationship with a lessee, a recreation management, and yeah.
Brian Bartkowiak, Natural Resource Damage Program also includes weed control and is available online. If you'd like to review it, we can send you the link.
Thanks, yeah, I'd be interested. We'll take it.
Okay.
Andy Fisher. Thank you.
Chris Stark, CSKT, can you just send that to us? I'm supposed to, that's searching it out.
Yes, that's a request.
Right.
Ray Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program. That is a request that we would be happy to put.
Steve Hill.
Ray, a couple of things. The beaver analog, monitoring and the conifer encroachment. I'd just be interested to know what metrics you use to say they're a great success.
Ray Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program. So as far as metrics for the beaver dam analogs, whether or not they're successful or not, I think it's we have been. So Tori Ritter is the lead with Fish, Wildlife and Parks for essentially numerous built beaver and beaver dam analog projects throughout the state. I wouldn't say, Steve, that we have developed quantitative measures in terms of how to measure the success or failure of those analogs. However, at this point, some of these projects I personally visit numerous times, and we can just visually assess whether or not there are pools and ponds forming behind them. In some sites, I've seen amphibians, eggs, and some of these ponds have been created. So it's fair to say that we don't have a quantitative measure, but I'd say that we have expert opinion. Both myself as well as Tori Ritter has worked with us in some of these, and we continue to evaluate these projects as we go. As far as the conifer encroachment projects, again, the aspen stands, it would be, expert knowledge. In the case of the complete projects that I'm referencing, we've worked with just both WRC as well as the forester with the Department of Natural Resources. We've all gone in and been able to say, oh, wow, we have willows, we have, willows would be in the case of the PDAs, but in the case of removal of conifers from aspen stands, we can visually assess whether or not there's regeneration occurring. So, I have high confidence that those are successful projects for wildlife. So.
Let's go to Steve for a follow-up.
Just follow up, Steve Hill, Anaconda. I think that's great, Ray. It's hard to develop metrics that you can use, but I guess it's nice to look from year to year to year to see the growth of the ponds and the increased wetlands and regeneration of an aspen grove. But from a sustainability standpoint, given climate now, do you think that that's sustainable, or are the conifers gonna continue to encroach, which effectively is over and over again? I mean, just your opinion.
Yeah, Vinkey Natural Resource Damage Program. The succession of conifers into aspen stands and grasslands or establishment is part of the natural succession of ecological systems. Because of the fact that we've had fire suppression in so many of these grasslands, that's what's really accelerated, in a decades-long scale, why we have more conifers moving into grasslands. By making these entries, so to speak, to use forestry terminology, but to go in and actually cut out or masticate conifers from grasslands, we're essentially resetting the vegetative state. Something that would have occurred by fire, we're now doing through handwork. I think it's successful and we're basically, setting back succession several decades, something that would have occurred otherwise through fire management. And as far as the beaver dam analogs, some have been more successful than others in the drainage. That's kind of why it is a learning basis. And I mentioned, we want to place them in streams that are naturally more sinuous, that have good habitat for beavers, and that have not a very steep grading. So in some of the first generation BDAs that were built, not all those things were true. And we've seen that those BDAs didn't hold up. In some other cases, one that I just looked at Mount Pig, and it's actually quite exceptional how successful they've been. So anyway, I think there's been learning opportunities for everybody nationally in terms of working with beaver dam analogs. And as far as the removal of conifers from grasslands and aspen stands, I think that's generally recognized as an advantageous use of funds. So
Keep it out to the bank trade.
Yeah.
Chris Stark.
Chris Stark, CSKT. A bunch of pictures might take care of you being the only expert in the room. If you would, in the future, and I'm going to ask this to Fish and Wildlife and Parks across the state, because we're doing a lot of interesting things to and for beaver implications, it'd be great if you guys would take pictures when you watch a dam or when you go and monitor things. Take a picture. Brian's got a great example of what a picture just walks us. Front end on Sanger Creek, we're done. We see it. So if you could do the same thing on all of those things.
I appreciate that. Actually,
Right.
do a bit. Program.
Kill that.
I am used to a dialogue. Apologize, Kristie. Yes, we do have pictures. I'll be happy to provide them in the future relative to analysis of beaver dam analogs and invasion of conifers.
Any other questions from the advisory council? Steve Hill.
Just one, Steve Hill, Anaconda, just one comment, Ray, on the conference, we're trying to preserve and enhance our grasslands. Should some of that responsibility be on the Forest Service as well? Are we partnering with the Forest Service on that? Some of these, I assume some of these properties are Forest Service. Federal land.
Right. I got it. Great, Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program. The projects that I've highlighted are actually on state and private lands. And the state DNRC in this case, although I'm aware that Fish, Wildlife and Parks is planning some conifer removal projects as well. The state has provided some matching services by through labor of, they've had saw crews that have worked in some of these projects. As far as federal projects, it is an active, the feds are working on a lot of projects for conifer enhanced or removal of conifers from grasslands. They're not working with us directly on any of those projects.
Steve, thanks, Ray.
Yep.
Any other questions from the advisory council? Any questions from the public here or online? Yes.
Carl Haming, Anaconda. Randy, I think this is one for you. Just curious with the fishing access dollars on, some of the Clark Fork. Is Coors Bend kind of the one and only that y'all are focused on right now, or looking at some other potential sites or other improvements to existing access sites?
Vinkey Natural Resource Damage Program, I think Nathan or Brian would be the best parties to answer that question.
Nathan,
This Nathan Cook, Natural Resource Damage Program. Forest Bend is the one we're currently developing or working with FWP on developing. FWP has plans to do some improvements and including build a boat ramp and a parking area there. And that's partially due to recreation concerns. There's not a boat ramp there currently, but it's also based on resource concerns. Folks were just backing their trailers off the steep bank that's eroding the river. So there's some urgency to get those improvements completed, but there is contamination at the site. And so we offered to help them figure out where and how much contamination there is. We have, as you're probably aware, we've also been working on access at other sites. For instance, the Sager Lang site has some new access features. And we have other sites that are still in development, including calling it the downstream of Deer Lodge site. We won't call it the vet clinic anymore. As well as Everstone Park.
any other questions from the public? Online, anything, Miranda? No. All right, at this point in time, we're gonna take our 10-minute break. We're running a little behind, so we are gonna come back at 2:38. 2:30.
Hey, Steve.
What's up?
The fence, that stuff.
You were being more generous. I was gonna.
2:38, we'll come back.
Okay, 2:38. Brian, am I still sharing online?
Yep.
Okay, so Brian Bartkowiak, Natural Resource Damage Program. I'm gonna talk about the Instream Blue release that we did from Silver Lake this year. This was, NRD funded the release, it's Beal Silver Water and Infrastructure, and Ally with TU was very instrumental in helping us work through this release with Beal Silver, and also the very extensive monitoring that went out along with this. Wasn't extensive as of previous years, but it was pretty extensive. And I will also say that all of the graphs you are about to see were made by Ally, including organizing all of the people to collect the data to make the graphs. So thank you very much. With that said, this portion is going to be very graph heavy. I'm going to try to walk you through it slowly, but there is a lot of information to absorb from these graphs. Just to give you a summary of the releases today, this is the 4th release that we have worked with Beal Silver to do from Silver Lake. 17 release, 19 release. The biggest one to that date was the 21, very similar to the release this year. This year's release, we, again, similar to 2021, we released about 3,000 acre feet over 47 days, about 30 to 32 CFS between July 10th and August 26th. About 11.5 foot in water level drop at Silver Lake. And just to note, for those of you paying attention to the financials, you don't see this this number show up in the financials yet. It's because we have not received the invoice yet. So if you were paying attention, that was your trick question for the day. Okay, so I promised you a very graph heavy presentation. This is a synoptic flow monitoring graph. So what's a synoptic flow? Basically, Ally organized a bunch of folks from CFC, TU, FWP, NRD to all go out on the same day. We met at the town pump in Anaconda. We all split up and we tried to measure flows at various locations, all the way from Silver Lake, all the way down to Deer Lodge at the same time to kind of give a picture of what's going on with the release. So what you see here is you have flow on the x-axis, and then you have the most upstream, which Silver Lake just below the ditch just below Silver Lake, all the way down to Deer Lodge on the y-axis. This line is the flow measured at the various locations. Blues are inputs, reds are withdrawals from the system. So starting at 30 CFS, right below Silver Lake in the ditch, gaining a little water from Twin Lakes Creek, where it officially joins with Warm Springs Creek. First major diversion is Myers Dam, just in Anaconda, water withdrawal. Gaining a little more water through Anaconda. The first major irrigation withdrawal is the Gardner diversion, just below. Are you having a hard time looking?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay.
Past the screen.
Just below Anaconda. Another small withdrawal from the WMA diversion above Warm Springs. This is where Silver Creek and Warm Springs Creek come together to form the Clark Fork. A little more increase in flow from Lost Creek, a little irrigation withdrawal from the Wayland Ditch, a major irrigation withdrawal from West Side Ditch, small stock water withdrawal from Valentin Ditch, the Sagard Lane Pump Station, which you just saw a picture of, and then ending in Deer Lodge here. So that's kind of the whole release in a summary in a day. So what were the effects? Again, a lot of information on this graph. Right here, we're looking at Warm Springs Creek. flow on the y-axis, time on the x-axis. These blue bars are precipitation events. This blue box is the actual flow out of Silver Lake. Looking at the two gauges, one just in Anaconda, you can obviously see the start of the release, increase in flow. Similar trend at the USGS gauge at Warm Springs Creek at Warm Springs, increase in flow, decrease through the release. The purple line is a gauge that TU manages just below Gardner Ditch. It follows the very same trend. This red line is the minimum flow target for Warm Springs. So what this graph is telling me is, and we coordinated the timing of the release, working with Caleb. Again, we saw the last of the rains of early July, and then we were seeing the hydrograph of the flows in Warm Springs Creek start to really drop. Obviously the release starts and it keeps going. What is notable from this graph to me is how fast these flows were dropping on this upper end, and also what happened to the flows when we stopped the release, even with this major rain event right after the release. I will point out that we did stay above the target, the minimum flows for the majority of the time. We did drop below toward the end of the release though. Very similar response. Again, now we're looking at the Clark Fork River. The green line is the flow at Galen, so that's the upstream gauge. Yellow line is the flow at Deer Lodge, that's right here in town. Again, the bars are precipitation events. The blue box is the release from Silver Lake. The green line here is the minimum flow target at Galen. So you're comparing this line to see if we met our flow targets. We met the flow targets throughout the release at Galen. You can see we obviously didn't meet, comparing the yellow line to the yellow line, orange line. We didn't meet the flows at Deer Lodge throughout the release, but again, what this graph is telling me is, yes, we dropped below minimum flow targets, but when we turned off the water, you can really see what happened to the flow in the main step. And, you know, one of the things that we always talk about is what are the benefits? What are the benefits of releases? Is this worth doing again? Is this meeting flow targets? It is really hard to say what could have been. You know, like this is showing you what happened to the flows with release. I have no way of telling you what the flows would have looked like if we didn't do the release. So we're trying to gauge benefit of something that happened compared to something that didn't happen. Yes, Andy, do you have a clarifying question?
Yeah, somewhat. Just curious if you could.
Andy Fisher.
Andy Fisher, just wanted to see if you could speak to what degree was there enforcement to ensure that other irrigators didn't take that water that went downstream? And I guess what effect was that? Effective, or is that still a response that you're trying to tease out of this?
So, Allie will have a complete, Brian Bartkowiak, National Research Damage Program. See, Ray, you're not the only one. Allie's preparing a complete report. Part of that report is a reach gains map that kind of gives you a different, same picture in a different way of the graph I showed you. We did not do any enforcement of flows. We did the same thing that we did in 21, is between NRD, CFC, and TU, we called all the irrigators. And we didn't say, turn down your head gates, but we politely asked them not to turn up their head gates. You know, I think that is a very good question, and that is something that we need to consider with future releases. You know, this was the fourth time this happened. This is like the second, what I would say, real release from Silver Lake. And I think the next step on this release would be, how do we shepherd the water downstream? Well, how do we, very similar to the Clark Fork Coalition does on Racetrack Lake, ensure our stored water is actually staying in the river?
Thanks.
Chris Stark.
Chris Stark, CSKT. After you drop the $250,000 in that water, do you own it? Or, I mean, is there some sort of water right where you can actually say you can't take this water before it gets to the point, whatever that would be?
Brian Bartkowiak, National Research Dam, we don't own it, UCFRB owns it. They have a in-stream flow right that goes all the way to Gold Creek, I believe. So once that water is in stream, it is beneficial use. And we can, well, if UCFRB can, they own it, but if they give us the authority, we can shepherd that water downstream.
Maureen Connor, Brian, I think this would be like pretty mean, but under the laws and the water leasing stuff, you could certainly ask the district court for a water commissioner. Everybody'd be pretty mad at you, but I think it's a pretty clear argument. So I'm just throwing that out there. I know that certain of those sites have been monitored forever by citizen volunteers, but this is a lot of money. I mean, it is, so I think that's a good opinion and maybe talk about it later thing, but just saying.
Andy Fisher, one other kind of follow-up question on that, Brian. And in reference to Chris's comment about, $280,000 for 3,000 acre feet, that's about $93 an acre foot for a single year lease from some of the valuation studies that I've seen for the upper Clark Fork Basin. We've typically seen lease prices between $5 and about $30 an acre foot. So it's being maybe 3 times what the upper end is that's been typically paid. I guess, how did you justify the premium on the price for this water specifically?
Brian, Natural Resources Dam Program, it is a very expensive price for water. I thought the upper end was about $46 an acre foot, but you know water more than I do, so I'll just at the $30 an acre foot. What that price doesn't consider, and what we've heard from UCFRB, is that's the price of the water. That is not the price of delivering that water. And so I will leave it there. I'm going to look at Ally, who has her hand up.
Yeah, if I can just add to the valuation a little bit, there is a new basin profile that has increased that range a little bit. But as you know, most of those leases are agricultural leases. And so this is not agricultural water, so it's not quite apples to apples. And so in an agricultural lease, we're often asking someone to shut a head gate or turn a pump off. In this case, we're asking them to send staff up to turn a pump on, maintain that pump, pay for the electricity for that pump. So as far as valuation goes, it's not quite as simple as just comparing it to this agricultural lease that you're benefiting. So that's kind of where that increase in price comes from.
Madam Chairman, Brian, council, I've been waiting all day to say this, sorry, but Butte's looking at Silver Lake water for different use right now with, what the heck is it? Some
Data processing.
data processing. So thank you. And, I just think we really need to keep our eye on that with respect to Silver Lake and the Upper Clark Fork. I don't know where it would come back into the system if data processing, if Butte was to suddenly go, yeah, it's worth this much money and we're giving it to our data processing plant. I don't know where it would come back into the system, but I do know it might be warmer. But it is something to keep paying attention to in the news to see how far they're getting on that. Right now, the focus is on electrical power costs and what that might do, but I'm watching this as close as I can because of the connection with Georgetown. So that's just a comment for the council to keep an eye on that, and think it could turn out to be a frozen pizza debacle, but.
Big Ring said?
Make ringside, get Silver Bowl. We've got long discussions on this over there right now. They want 3 million gallons a day. That data process. Based on what's already there. It's hardly possible. And there's a group that's been formed to go to the PSC. Because for the last year, the power company has been trying to use the Montana law that says if you put a heavy load on the system, whoever puts that load on is required to ensure that it doesn't increase cost the ratepayer. Well, the power company has right now 750 megawatt capacity of the entire system, which is the consumption of the entire state, which is all our customers. At 750, they said they don't have quite enough. The 5 data centers they're dealing with wants another 750. They want to build power plants to bring another 750 on and roll that into the rate base as a cost. So I would like to see this committee appoint somebody, join the group that's dealing with the PSC on what a threat the data centers are and the water usage is. So the state, community, the state, everything. I'd like to get to try on board if we could.
Drives it. We agree with you.
Chris Stark?
Yes, Katie, yes.
So, Brian, Natural Resource Dam, I was going to suggest that this is a wonderful discussion. And I would like everybody to, this is the exact discussion I want to get to with this council. But let's keep this in mind as I go through the rest of these slides. And I mean, what we're really weighing is the value of this water compared to the resource benefit. Another shocker, I'm not gonna be able to give you a price per fish for this release as it relates to the 280,000 that we spent. I will say, as I'm going through these graphs, keep in mind, there is no other source of this water that you can literally flip a switch to get 30 CFS into the creek.
Right.
So great discussion. If there's is there any clarifying questions before I continue?
Bill?
Yeah. Bill Shank, FWP, just simple question here. Has there been any conversation with Butte Silver about multi-year agreements?
Put a pin in that.
Yeah.
Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program, short answer, yes. I'll talk about it a little more. It's not, it's so recent, it hasn't even made a slide yet.
All right, we're gonna take one more question, then we're gonna move on and we'll do the rest of them at the end. Nick Prince,
Butte Silver Bowl. They've had this discussions for the last 5 years. There's no way Butte Silver Bowl is gonna sign a long-term contract with that water. Because 20 years from now, that's gonna be water for the community. It will not do it as long as I'm alive.
All right, Brian. can you
Okay.
continue, Please, with your summary.
Continuing on, again, we're trying to compare what happened versus what didn't happen. It is very hard to compare one water year to the other water year, but we're gonna make an attempt. Again, you see flow on the x-axis, time on the y-axis, the minimum flow target at Warm Springs, comparing yellow solid to yellow dotted is 2005 is the solid, 2004 is the dotted. So you can compare 2004 was a very bad water year, 2005 was a bad water year. But you can see looking yellow to dotted yellow, and then blue is in at the lower gauge on Warm Springs. Blue solid to blue dotted, there was a increase of flow from Silver Lake. Again, very similar graph. Now we're looking at the Clark Fork at Galen, minimum flow target. You can see we didn't meet, we dropped below minimum flow targets in 24. Throughout the release, we maintained the minimum flow target. So you see there was a flow benefit at Galen. You see The same thing I showed you before, didn't make it the whole year, but we did have an increase about how bad it could have been looking back at 2024. Temperature doesn't tell the same picture as flow does. Again, you're trying to compare what happened with what didn't happen. This purple line is the temperature coming out of Silver Lake. You can see as the water level drops, the temperature benefits aren't as noticeable. Water actually gets pretty warm as it, well, not warmer as it comes out of Silver Lake. Blue line is the critical threshold for bull trout. Red line is the critical threshold for cutthroat. Again, you can see we're bouncing around those critical thresholds, even in Warm Springs Creek with this release. Same thing, looking at flow targets. Yellow is Deer Lodge, green is Galen, purple is what's coming out. You can see we are well above bull trout thresholds and bouncing around the temperature thresholds for cutthroat. As Andy so quickly calculated, about $93 an acre foot from Silver Lake. We did, I mean, I think these graphs are pretty telling. There is a flow benefit and a temperature benefit from this water. Again, we met flow targets at Clark Fork. We didn't meet them throughout the release at Warm Springs or at Deer Lodge. We did see an increase over what it could have been like in 24. Again, this was a very bad water year throughout Montana. I can't tell you how bad it would have been without this release, but again, else. Aquatic benefits, I mean, everybody wants to compare this to aquatic benefits, but you know, those benefits won't be realized for a few years to come. So I can't tell you how many fish didn't die from this release. I can't, so, and then, as it relates to this discussion, as of yesterday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon, or Monday afternoon, I believe, we did receive a draft agreement from Butte Silverbow that authorizes, and Ally might have to help me out with this because I actually haven't been in the office to read the whole thing, but it does authorize, once they sign this agreement, it will authorize single season release agreements. So that master agreement, my understanding, that would go to the commission, and then basically the chief executive can make the decision on individual one-time lease agreements. The other thing that is not on the slide, because this again just came about earlier this week, Trout Unlimited is going to take that agreement, submit it to the Columbia Basin Water Transaction Program for some funding, and I believe that they are doing that for a 5-year agreement. So we're looking at cost share between NRD and the EU and the Columbia Basin Water Transaction Program. I think the discussion now is probably an opportune time to continue the discussion about what are the benefits of this release, and is it worth pursuing releases in future years with Butte Silverbow.
Bill.
On the hydrographs that you showed earlier, 24 and 25, you might, and it's a pretty simple thing, calculate regression lines on those. See what the slope of the regression line is. Might help you identify not just the changes in the diversions, but the changes in recharge and discharge within the stream bank itself.
Mm-hmm.
And Excel will do that.
Yeah, and again, Ally is working on a report that goes into this in much more detail. But I thought it was important to get this information in front of the council.
Okay.
And we can email that as soon as it hits our website. We'll be happy to email that out.
Does the advisory council have additional questions or commentary on the value of the Silver Lake water in relation to the resource value that's being impacted or the multi-year agreement with these at this point.
So to answer Bill's question, we do have a framework for a multiple use agreement.
Andy Fisher, just as a follow-up to my earlier question, I didn't mean that as criticism, it was in any way, it was I just wanted to make a comment that the resource value of this flow in a year like this is very hard to quantify, especially in such a dry year. So definitely applaud you guys for making this happen.
And Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program, we are up here, we are looking for feedback. This is very expensive water. You know, as you know, I'll look at Nick, this has been a, you know, negotiation that's been going on.
Nick and Chris, would you guys like to be respectful of the speaker? He's answering your question right now, Nick, so I think it's important for you to hear. Go ahead.
We are looking for the council's feedback. This has been a very long negotiation, somewhat frustrating with Butte Silver Bow at times. And we're looking for, you know, what your thoughts, your recommendations on where to go next with this.
All right,
Madam Chairman, council, just an observation. I guess we heard this with racetrack, and this was quite a while ago, and in my opinion, it's only gonna get worse, but we're starting to set the price for water in this basin. And this is kind of the upper end of what we've seen. My comment is, we've done this kind of before, we're doing it again now. The resource value is impossible, difficult to quantify, but it is really important. So that's just a comment, but I guess the big picture thing is we're setting precedent to some degree of the price of water. Just saying.
Nick Ringside.
So we're all, like more covered. If you look at the 2011 long-range plan that Governor Sorenson signed and became 2012, he has a special statement in there. Report signature saying that he wants the NRDP to consider use of Silver Bow Lake for augmentation of the Clark Fork River compared to any other options. It's a separate special statement. Really important.
Chris Stark.
Chris Stark, CSKP. Chair Maureen. Are you suggesting that these valuations are risky? I didn't quite understand.
No, I'm just.
Hang on, Maureen. Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, it is a real number that these folks spent on that water. So it is the value. So I'm scratching my head going, well, if we can say it costs $500,000 next year, but then, and this is where I really want to ask the question is of the state, who runs the fishing program, surely you have the value. I heard $3 billion statewide, I thought, some big number. And so I'm curious, is that not possible? Just Clark Fork, upper fishing use or something? I mean, the hunters got a number.
This is Christy Beal, Missoula. I'm gonna ask all of you folks that are asking questions, I'm not trying to shut down discussion. I'm asking you to be as succinct as you can with your questions and your answers, respectful of the people who are speaking. We are far behind, and some of you I know need to leave. And I'm trying to get everything done before people have to go. So please be succinct and don't be repeating. Maureen Connor.
Let me clarify, Madam Chairman, Maureen Connor. Just no, I'm not suggesting that it's bad. I'm trying to remind the council, let me see if I can be really clear here, is that we're getting to the days of buying water for Instream, okay? We've been here before, we're here now. It's only going to be more valuable, I guess, in the future. I'm not suggesting this is too much. It's a market economy, and it's hard for, I think, the state and the council to respond to that, but not suggesting it's too much, just pointing out that we are in these changing times, and this is a verge of buying water, and we're sort of setting values on water inadvertently because we want to see water in the Clark Fork. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program. I have two thoughts for the council's consideration. One, you know, comparing this to a dozen eggs. You go to the store and you say, I don't want to spend $10 on a dozen eggs. But if you want a dozen eggs, that's what you gotta spend. Second, and Andy brings it up, this is the cost of the water. And if you look at, and adding on to Maureen's comment, if you look at the time and effort, and that equates to money that the Clark Fork Coalition spends managing the racetrack water to the Clark Fork, that is not insignificant either. So for your consideration, I mean, this, you're very correct, Maureen. This is the cost of the water. There's no other system that you can literally flip a switch and get 30 CFS. But that is not going to be the cost. I mean, we do need to, and this is something that we do need to work on if we continue these releases, is how do we ensure this $280,000 is getting water downstream?
Any additional questions, comments from the advisory council? Any questions, comments from public here or online? Yes.
Yes, Ben Laporte, Trout Unlimited. Brian, you mentioned that you called all the irrigators, partners called the irrigators to let them know releasing the water. Did you follow up with them to inquire how they manage their head gates and how did they follow through with your not request, but your introduction to the release?
Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program, from what we've seen from our synoptic run, I don't think anybody was taking more than their water rights. The good thing with water is the more water you have in the system, the more water there is to go around. So adding 30 CFS to the system is allowing people not to necessarily take that 30 CFS, but is allowing people to take their water because of conveyance flows and all that good stuff. I hope that answers your question.
Is there any more question or comment from public here or online? All right.
I will just, if it's okay, Kristie, I'll just kind of put a nice little bow on this part. Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program, thank you, Kristie. We are going to continue to work with Beal Silverbow on this long-term agreement. Trout Unlimited will submit their request to CBWTP. I have no prediction about the data center in Butte or what might become of this water, but I am not hearing any objection from this council to proceeding with looking at a longer term release. I think that's a statement.
All right, let's move on to the next item, please.
Okay. Ray Vinkey, Natural Resource Damage Program. Gave you the first one for free.
And this is Kristie Beal, Missoula. Before Ray gets started, I just want to again remind everyone, we are running quite a bit behind. And so that people don't get left out of the conversation towards the end, please do your very best to be succinct with your questions and comments. And let's keep our questions of Ray on this to clarification questions until the end, please. Thank you. Ray.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to be speaking about infrastructure development projects, or sorry, excuse me, improvement projects to infrastructure on Warm Springs Creek. Warm Springs Creek is a high priority watershed for the Natural Resource Damage Program, and improving fish passage in that watershed is one of our highest priorities. So our goal in this project is to allow for fish passage, including native bull trout, including native bull trout, and excuse me. So. Cool.
Everybody, why don't you talk here and I'll really shine.
Just advance slides.
Oh.
Sorry. All right, so Warm Springs Creek is a high value fishery, both because it provides recruitment of brown trout and cutthroat trout to the Clark Fork, as well as provides high quality habitat for bull trout in the watershed. So NRDP has been working with multiple cooperators. This has been a very collaborative project to improve, allow better passage for bull trout and other fish around diversions in the watershed. So in 2024, we completed fish traps at Myers, Twin, and Storm Lakes Creeks. All of those are to facilitate the capture of bull trout. And we're also planning work to be completed in 2026 on agriculture diversions on Gardner, as well as in the early planning stages of work on a diversion on the Fish, Wildlife and Parks Wildlife Management Area. Ultimately, the resource benefits of these projects will be 64 miles of reconnected high-quality habitat in the watershed, and we're allowed for mature bull trout to reach spawning habitat and headwaters, which they're currently impeded from reaching. Also, we will increase recruitment of, in particular, brown trout to the Clark Fork. Again, I just want to emphasize again, it's been a highly collaborative project, which has allowed us to bring approximately 50% of the funds this project have been from federal match. I'd also like to acknowledge Caleb with Fish, Wildlife and Parks and with Trout Unlimited, both of whom provided data and images for this presentation. All right, so here's Warm Springs Creek here. Again, it's at the headwaters, the Upper Clark Fork. It provides clean, cold water for bull trout in particular and other fisheries. It's got a very high value for native fish. That's why it's prioritized, and of overall recruitment of trout to the Upper Clark Fork. So the problems that we're trying to address through this project have been barriers to as a result of agricultural and industrial diversions, barriers to trout movement. I'm going to work from top to bottom, but we just completed a project again on installing fish traps at the Storm Lakes Creek diversion, as well as the Myers diversion and the Twin Lakes Creek diversion. Trout Unlimited has been working with the Forest Service on a Storm Lake diversion. NRD completed fish screen at the Anaconda diversion, and we're in development, as I mentioned, on working to address passage issues at the Gardner diversion and on the Warm Springs WMA. Overall, barriers to migration presented by these diversions, they impact the genetics of populations, as well as population size and the demographics of those populations. Here, just our images of each one of these diversions that we built fish traps at. Here's Storm Lake, Twin Lakes, and Myers Dam. One thing to note here is there's a fisheries technician using a net to attempt to capture bull trout. And this is what FWP has been doing for about a decade in order to move bull trout to their spawning tributaries. They essentially been going to the diversions at a time when they know they're bull trout running, electrofishing and trying to net those fish, and then move them around the diversion so that they can access habitat at the headwaters. This has not been an especially effective method, and that's why we completed the fish traps projects. Just an example here, here's a mature bull trout that wasn't able to reach spawning habitat at Storm Lakes Basin, just because essentially it's ran under that barrier. So, but this is just a very good, visual example of what we're talking about. We have spawning fish that can't get to where they need to spawn to ensure the persistence of the population. One thing that's very interesting about Warm Springs Creek is that we have 3 different life histories for bull trout in the drainage. Some fish migrate from Storm Lakes Creek, from Silver Lake up Storm Lakes. Some are residents to the tributaries, to the headwaters, and some fish are also migrating from Warm Springs Creek within it to the headwaters to spawn. So we have 3 different life histories. It's something that's especially interesting about Warm Springs Creek, and also helps, I think, to assure that this population is more stable across time. All right, so right on the right-hand side here, we have a measure of genetic diversity. The scale is from 0 to 1, with 0 being the most disadvantageous. We would essentially say that there's no diversity in that population, which would have very adverse impacts to the population. But whereas a 1 would be a completely connected population, where any individual can breed with any other individual. What we know is that diversity of bull trout genetics in Warm Springs Creek has been relatively low. It's the lowest of sampled populations in the Upper Clark Fork, and it's lower than average diversity of bull trout across the range of the Northwest. FWP, their geneticists identified that low genetic diversity is a threat to the long-term persistence of these populations. And that's really our key message here, is that the barriers to migration were presenting a genetic threat to the persistence of the population. As a result of that, FWP began again manually capturing fish through electrofishing and netting fish in 2010. Monitoring did show that there was some improvement to the native genetics of those bull trout, but it really wasn't efficient. Technicians were only able to show up when they're available. You don't necessarily know the entire window when bull trout are present. So that was how we identified the need with FWP to build the fish traps. So here is the Myers Dam fish trap. These traps were completed in 2024. They're substantially complete. There were some minor adjustments which were necessary this year. But the way this works, this would be upstream. So water's coming down Warm Springs Creek. This would be a trash rack to prevent woody debris or anything else from getting into the trap. The water flows through the trap at a high volume, enough that it's going to attract bull trout, which are trying to migrate upstream. This is the V-notch where bull trout, again, as they're following the current, they're going to go into this trap, swim into this trap, and they're unable to escape. It's sort of like if anybody has ever used a trap for crawfish or something. Those fish, the crab or they're unable to go in, and then they can't find their way back out. So anyway, so that then holds the trout within that trap. Caleb and his crew can come in, swing open the top of this trap, dip net, and then capture the bull trout and just drive them around the barriers where they can complete their migration and spawn. So yeah, so that's how those work. This was the first year that these traps were operational, and they were quite successful at Storm Lake, where 26 bull trout with native genetics were transported upstream, where they could reach their spawn habitat. 21 bull trout were hybrids. Those fish were returned and did not. FWP doesn't want those fish to breed. They're bull trout that have been intermixed with brook trout, and those hybrids were returned below the barriers. There were also 5 mature bull trout which were captured at Twin Lakes, and only 1 at Myers Dam. Part of that was because there were some issues with Myers Dam. There's a lot of debris that was coming into the top of the trap and preventing it from functioning properly. So we're refining that. But as far as largely, this has been a banner project in terms of we build it, and year one, it's already functioning and accomplishing our goals. So going into the future, Fish, Wildlife and Parks and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service will operate these traps. Each one of these single fish, every one of these mature bull trout, they're like gold for the population in terms of ensuring the long-term persistence of these populations and ensuring the pure genetics that are within the stream continue. Kristie, land your
No,
way here.
you're fine.
Um,
It's just the stand.
Okay, so, but there are a few refinements that we're gonna need to make to the trap screens, to the V notches, to assure they function as well as possible, to make sure no fish are trapped, to make sure debris isn't altering the function of these traps, but we'll do that as necessary and continue to operate these traps in the future. All right, so that's the fish traps. So currently in design and hopefully out for bid next year is going to be a fish screen on the garden diversion that will be placed, and also improvements. We're going to build a rock ramp, which is essentially going to allow fish to pass where they're currently not able to pass at high flows. But the garden diversion is downstream of Anaconda, above the Clark Fork. It's the diversion that provides water to agricultural use near Galen and Anaconda. And again, there's both the barrier to migration is a problem, as well as the potential for entrainment of fish in ditches. This impacts not just potentially bull trout and cutthroat, but also brown trout, for which we know that Warm Springs is an important drainage. So we will most likely reach 90% design on this project in 2025, with permitting occurring in 2026, as well as construction. And this has also been a very highly cooperative project. Some of the remaining funds from the fish traps will be applied to the garden diversion. All right, so we're not quite as far along with the wildlife management area diversion, but Fish, Wildlife and Parks draws water out of Warm Springs Creek in order to feed ponds that provide habitat on the WMA. We're looking at basically developing a project to put a fish screen in place there. And again, address some of the barriers to passage and entrainment on the wildlife management area. Fish, Wildlife and Parks did secure $50,000 to work on the project. To what degree NRDP will be able to support it, I think is unknown. It's going to depend on how much wrapping up Gardner or completing Gardner costs. All right, so here's an overview of where we stand at funding on the Warm Springs Creek projects. To date, we've spent approximately $1.6 million, both in design, work on the Gardner project, and design and completion of construction on the fish traps. We've got a very substantial cash match from federal sources. That's been 36%. And when you include the indirect matching funds from Trout Unlimited, from Forest Service for staff time, et cetera, but we've approximately 50% matched NRD dollars on these Warm Springs projects. And again, that's really a testament to the excellent work that our cooperators with Forest Service and Trout Unlimited has done. So the status of funds, we have approximately $2 million allocated to Warm Springs Creek. Out of that $2 million, I would like to note that 425 were funds that were allocated to Warm Springs Creek through the 2024 revisions, where we allocated additional funds to Warm Springs Creek. To date, we've spent approximately $1 million. There's a little less than $1 million remaining in those funds, of NRD funds, and there's less than $300,000 remaining in the federal funds. So again, with garden diversion being our highest value, we anticipate the cost for that project will be about $1.4 million. It's very hard to say until we have the bids in hand how much that project is going to cost, but we know it's going to be expensive, and there may be a shortfall in funding in order to complete the Gardner project. In order to address that, we're trying to anticipate any potential needs for additional funding. We're going to put in Trout Unlimited and FWP-NRD will be future fisheries grant next spring. We're also, if we can, looking for other federal funding opportunities, other state funding opportunities, and turning from the DNRC. And if possible, we may need to use the aquatic contingent. So, but I think it's, I guess what I'd like to wrap up with, as far as Gardner is saying is it's a high priority project. It's one of our highest priorities for passage in Warm Springs Creek. At this point, that ultimate cost is going to be, we don't know, approximately $1.4 million, and we're doing our very best to assure we have all the funds at hand. So, but yeah, I think that's all I have for Warm Springs Creek. Do we want to take questions, Brian, on Warm Springs, or hold all the questions until after we've discussed all the projects?
Why don't we take questions right now on Warm Springs? If anybody has questions specifically on Warm Springs, we'll go Steve Hill.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Steve Hill, Anaconda. All of this is great, but are there plans to recreate the natural channel along that crosses Highway 48?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Steve. This is Ray Vinkey with the Natural Resource Damage Program. And NRD and our other cooperators are aware that Warm Springs Creek has been substantially straightened. That's the result of the fact that, it's used to, for industrial uses to provide water to the smelters. There is a need for additional habitat work. That's something that we're going to look to do in the future. Having additional NRDP funds would be reliant on revisions to the restoration plans. We anticipate we're going to spend all the funds we have on these passage projects. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking about future habitat opportunities. We recognize the need. We, at this point, may not have the funds. So does that answer your question, Steve?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the advisory council on the Warm Springs projects? Okay, any questions from the public here in person or online on the Warm Springs projects? All right. We'll move next to the Blacktail project. We might have a slight variation.
Yes, I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to recap the project. And Steve's pictures, 1,000 words, sewer line crossing. We've gone over this in great detail. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. But to really address Steve's and the council questions are what are the benefits of this project? I will just talk a little bit about this slide. I'm going to ask Caleb to come up and talk about his telemetry. This is just this is the USGS gauge downstream of the golf course. You can see the swing in flows from when they turn on the irrigation to when they turn off their irrigation. And 2 CFS doesn't sound like a lot of flow, but when you're going between about 5.5 and 3.5, that's a pretty significant portion. So one of the aspects of this project is moving that pond offline with a passable diversion. That water would be in an irrigation pond, so you won't see these changes in flows from their irrigation demand anymore. And then I'll invite Caleb to talk about some of the telemetry. Don't forget to say your name. I forgot to say my name, but Kristie didn't catch that one.
Yeah, Caleb Erling with Fish, Wildlife and Parks. I don't have a lot to add. I think for us, the sewer line crossing is a high value part of this project. It's one of it is the last barrier that we've identified on Blacktail Creek that isn't either already been addressed or slated to be addressed within the coming years. We did a telemetry project on Blacktail Creek, looking at cutthroat migration around the basin and where they're running the problems at in 2023 and 2024. In 2023 is a really high flow year. And yeah, So here, I wasn't sure what was on here, sorry. This is, 2023 here, and this is 2024. The triangles are like your average flows, and the time period they're migrating is like right in here. And so in 2023, we didn't see a lot of issue at that sewer line crossing. The fish pretty much shot right past it because it was probably fully submerged under the water because the flows were, 50 to 100 CFS, which is a lot for Blacktail Creek. That's more than the Clark Fork's flowing right now. But 2024, you can see it was like much more average, more in like the 10 to 20 CFS range. And when it gets like that, that sewer line becomes like really exposed. It's a couple feet from, top to the bottom, and then the water is like spread out very laminarly across the top of that. That pipe, and it becomes a barrier for fish trying to get upstream. It's not a barrier for all fish. We had fish that went by it in 2023. I don't know if those are fish that just hit these little times when the water was a little bit higher, or if they're just fish that have the ability to jump it and other fish don't. These were like 12 to 16-inch fish that we had. We had 3 of them get stuck there. So this figure shows like all of our points. These points right here are fish that were stuck at that sewer line crossing in the spring of 2024. And then in 2023, the year that flows were really high, all of the fish made it back downstream of the crossing, but it gets to where the water is like a ½ inch deep going over the top of it because it's spread out across that whole pipe. And we did have a fish that was stuck there out migrating. It came down, ran into the pipe, and it sat there for like over a month until we got an August rainstorm and it used the higher flows to shoot downstream of the pipe. So anyways, I don't have a lot else to add to that, just that the sewer line crossing is a high priority. It's kind of the last barrier for migrating cutthroat in Blacktail Creek. And it's impeding migratory fish on certain areas right now.
Steve Hill.
Steve Hill, Anaconda. So Caleb, how many fish pass in the high flow year versus how many fish did not pass on the low flow year?
Caleb Erling, Fish Wildlife and Parks. So on the high flow year, I can't remember how many how many fish went by as 8 or 9. And like I said, all of them got upstream of it, except for 1 got caught going back downstream. On the low flow year, I'd have to go back. I know we had 3 that got stuck at the pipe. I'd have to go back and look how many total went up Blacktail Creek. I want to say it's 7. It was somewhere in that range, around 7 fish that went up Blacktail. We only had about 20 tags out, I think, in 2024 in cutthroat in like the upper part of Silverboat Creek. And so I think on a low flow year in 2024, like you saw in the figure, is pretty much average in Blacktail Creek, at least in the springtime. I think it's a pretty big problem on an average to low flow year. And then in those big flow years, it's really not a problem at all.
So
Steve Hill.
Steve Hill, Anaconda. 9 fish passed on the high flow year. 3 fish passed on the low. Okay. Pretty expensive fish.
Caleb Erling, yeah, those are just of the fish that we had tagged, so it's like a very small subset of the population.
Okay, Steve Hill, Anaconda. What do you consider the subset to be versus the total population impact?
Caleb Erling, Fish Wildlife Parks. Yeah, I'd be speculating too much. It's a small, we're in like the single digits percentage of the fish that we had tagged probably. There's not a lot of cutthroat in Silverboat Creek, and those cutthroat are relying on getting into the headwaters to spawn. So I guess my feeling on it would be that like any fish getting stuck at that sewer line crossing is important.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Chris Stark.
Chris Stark, CSKT. Quick question. Is there a resident population above that blockage?
Caleb Erling, yeah, there's a resident population that starts, this is all brook trout habitat down here. Cutthroat are just using it for migration. Like we don't ever pick brook trout down there, but there's a resident population that starts about like right here. That's pretty good, but the Silverboat Creek from about here all the way down has a migratory population of cutthroat with low densities.
Steve Hill.
Steve Hill, Anaconda. So by correcting this, what would you expect the fish to cross that and reproduce to be?
Caleb Erling, Fish, Wildlife and Park. So you're asking like what level of like change in production would we see? Yeah, I read your question and I think it would be pretty hard to quantify, I think. But like I said, the densities in Silverbow Creek are relatively low and there's not a lot of fish that are those migratory fish are really important. Every one's important. And I think, each individual that gets up there is important, at least like given the current population, like in the future, if the population gets a lot bigger and a few fish are getting, 50% of them or 30% of them are getting stuck at a barrier, then maybe it's not as critical. But given the current situation, I think every fish is pretty important. And the other thing is, there's no spawning habitat for them downstream of there. It's not like they can just go find a spot downstream of there. All of the cutthroat spawning habitat or anywhere that we've ever, that study showed a spawning area being is all upstream of that.
Okay. Just one more. Steve Hill, Anaconda. So you mentioned that the spawning conditions of some of the trout are as shallow as 2 inches. That's not going to change, right? What capacity does that spawning grounds have on Blacktail Creek if you were to complete this project?
Caleb Erling, Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Yeah, I think there's a fair bit of spawning habitat up in that upper reach. I think it's hard to say like how much they're utilizing right now. There's also resident fish utilizing that spawning habitat up there, but like from kind of where I pointed out that the resident population started, the majority of the spawning is way in the upper end, but we have seen spawning like all the way from the 9 mile to the Forest Service. The majority of it seems to be like up near the Forest Service. But we've seen them spawn in the canyon there along Roosevelt Drive and even down like in Thompson Park a little bit.
This is Brian, I have a clarification. Did you say there's an inch of water over the sewer line as they were out migrating or an inch of water in their spawning habitat? And
I think,
yeah, Caleb Erling, there's plenty of water in the up in the spawning habitat. The issue is that pipe, the stream has really over widened at the pipe. And so it's an issue when it gets really low, fish can't jump it. But then also just going back and forth across it, when the flows get low, it spreads out over that pipe, like, I don't know, 10, 12, 8, 15, I don't know. It's really wide right there. And you just get, this is not base flows in this picture. And you can see it's just like barely a trickle over that pipe. And I think some fish, like the fish that got stuck there, other fish figured it out. That one didn't. So, kind of the telemetry basically showed us that some fish are able to navigate it. Some.
Yeah, Steve Hill, Anaconda. That was a good clarification, right? My mistake.
Maureen Connor.
Thank you, Maureen Connor. Can we move on from this? I just want to remind people, it's amazing that there are any fish there anyway, where this is, and these are science fish. So there's a lot that we don't know here.
Big rings up.
I have one question. How much of the project is about that sewer pipe and how much is it about the country club?
Brian, National Resource Damage Program. Oh, I should have been prepared for this question, Mick. The total cost of the project is $560,000. I believe in the previous engineering cost estimate, it was $750,000 total, and I believe about $100,000 was the pipeline portion. So I would guess 75, to answer your question, Brian, 75 to 100,000 is the actual pipeline portion of the project.
Big ringside view. I'm all for getting the fish and supporting the fair environment. That country clubs, private, costly for private club. Public can't join, it doesn't affect. There's not a great many road. But I think we need to go to Silverbow County, fix it, because it's their problem. They're causing a we need to find a simple way to get the fish around small fish ladder or something. To spend, say $75,000 for the pipe, then it's $475,000 for the concrete float. We should not be funding a private concrete golf course for irrigation.
Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program, this council recommended expenditures of up to $229,000 to complete this project in the spring meeting. The project is out to bid. Construction is starting as soon as next week. Don't mean to say it so harshly, but that's where we're at.
Before we move on, there's been a new public, person that joined us from the public. I know his name because he's my husband, John Beal. Any new, folks joining us online? Any other questions or comments from the advisory council on the Blacktail project? Nick Ringsack.
Has this been approved by the trustee council yet?
Yes, the allocation has been approved by the trustee council. We have brought the motion the council passed to the TRC and to the governor's office, and they approved the motion of up to $229,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the advisory council on Blacktail? Any questions or comments on Blacktail from the public here or online? All right, we're gonna move next to our discussion portion. And we put a pin in two issues that have already come up because we're running late. The first two items that I want to talk about, I want us to have time for discussion are, what is it that is to be restored, replaced, and acquired? That was Mick's comment earlier that I asked him to put a pin in so we could move that here. And then the next item we're going to go to is Maureen Connor's Greenway, what the heck issue. So to Mick's question about, or the issue that was raised by Mick's comment about what is to be restored, replaced, or Mick Ringsack, did you want to?
I just think going forward with the limited funds that we do have, we ought to restrict any projects going forward strictly to within the consent decree, the inner area, whatever you want to call it, and not do any more funding on Rock Creek, any tributary outside of the area defined by the consent.
And Kristie Beal, I hear what you're saying there, Rick. Mick, I think that the issue is you're saying to the injured area, and the NRDP is saying it says to the injured resource.
Make Ringsack be. With that, replacing a lost resource, you can go anywhere, the whole damn world, and replace the lost resource. And I think we're in such dire straits, and if you look at what's going on in that area, the amount of money left and the amount of things to do internally, a really good example is Warm Springs Creek. There's a ditch that goes for miles. And, you know, we carved a branch trees and beat outside of the area, so it would make a nice trout stream, but we haven't done anything with Warm Springs, and I think you should be focusing on the things that are directly affecting us and not running off of it. Under that definition, you can be working in Red Lodge.
Kristie Beal, Missoula, I hear everything you're saying, Rick, but I don't feel like we can pin it on the NRDP staff. They look to us to what we're going to approve or not approve, and they look to us to modify the plan. So if we can't criticize them for following our marching orders. If we want to change the marching orders, we have a time and a place and a process to do that, and we need to do that.
Make Ringsack and Silver Bowl. I agree with you. Blame is on us in this board for the last 12, 14 years. Telling the NRDP, go ahead and do this, because That's all right, it's a good project, and I got a friend, owns a rental system. We, as the board, have a responsibility, this community, this area, Anaconda, Beal, the whole area, to do the maximize benefits to that area for those citizens. And so, yeah, I think we can change the rules and tell the NRDP, don't we get crowd unlimited to go approve any more projects outside of the area.
Brian, Natural Resource Damage Program. I greatly appreciate this discussion. I think it's a discussion that's been brewing even as part of the revision in January of 24. We did invite Pat and Brad. Brad's the fisheries biologist. I don't know, do we call it lower Clark Fork or middle Clark Fork?
I call it the lower upper Clark.
Lower upper Clark Fork, and Pat's the fisheries, the Region 2 fish manager. I would invite them if they have any comments on the benefits of Clifton Rock. I think that might help with the discussion. And I would also look to the council for what we can provide to you in 2028 to help inform your decision for the next revision. So Brad Doug Martin.
Doug Martin with the Natural Resource Damage Program. One thing to clarify, just to add to Nick's comment before Brad and Pat talk, is that the way the staff have always looked at this is that we've looked at what are the injured resources within the upper Clark Fork River Basin. We actually, the injured area, we actually looked back at, recently and tried to figure out, that's not a defined term. So we have actually the defined term of the injured resource. And the injured resource, especially when we're talking about the tributaries, are the main stems of Silverbow Creek and the Clark Fork River. The Clark Fork River from its confluence with Warm Springs Creek and Silverbow Creek down to the Milltown area. So that entire reach during our injury assessment was determined to be injured. So the area from Garrison to Warm Springs Creek is the area where there is active remediation going on by DEQ to clean up that contamination. But the injured resources go all the way to Milltown. So that is one of the reasons that and Pat and Brad can talk more about the justification for Rock Creek and Flint Creek. That's one of the reasons we go there. Warm Springs Creek is another example of there are some injured resources in Warm Springs Creek associated from the smelting activity there. But the upper reaches of Warm Springs Creek that Ray just talked about were not injured. There's not an injured resource at the headwaters there. The injury there is that those fish can't pass. So that's a replacement project to work with those fish, those resources there, so they can get past those barriers, spawn, and then help replace the fisheries population in the lower reaches. So that's the justification that we have used over the years to go the entire reach of the Clark Fork River from the confluence to the Milltown project or the Milltown area.
I think when Silverbow, you look at the consent decree, the definition says in your area or whatever you want to call it, stops and years. And all the tributaries entering the mainstream of the Clark Fork from Garrison up to the headwaters are eligible for. It also says that inflowing streams below Garrison are not considered part of the protected sector. And I understand what you're saying, but we need to focus above Garrison. Shouldn't be doing anything now below Garrison. And I know your interpretations, and I know the Trump Limited has done a wonderful job and recruit great projects to bring to you guys. And you pay the staff to do them. Trump Limited. And we've got to stop doing that. We have to focus. Charity begins at home. We got to get more home. That's my opinion. So I would like that discussion with the council, and I would like to rein in.
Kristie Beal, I do want to just make a comment here that I feel like we have tried to start doing that this year, last year, in some of the things that we require. I'm not saying we're done. And Miranda, you said there's somebody online. Is it an advisory council person?
It's Catherine and our attorney, and I'm assuming this meeting was gonna happen.
Okay. Yes, we'll call on you, Catherine.
Thank you, Kristie. Catherine Houserath, NRDP. I did want, and I don't want to extend this conversation, but I did want to quote from the CD just to clarify what we're talking about. There is actually a definition of all sites, and the first part does refer to the Upper Clark Fork River Basin above the confluence of the Little Blackfoot River near Garrison. That is the main stem of the Clark Fork River in all areas which naturally drain into the Clark Fork or its tributaries above this confluence. But then there's a second part of that definition that I think is getting lost. And it talks about the main stem of the Clark Fork River, which actually between the Idaho-Montana border and Garrison, including the Milltown Reservoir. So the CD has a pretty broad definition of where the areas where the injured resources were being settled in this 1999 consent decree.
Maureen.
Yeah, Maureen Connor, thank you, Madam Chairman. I am not happy to hear that we don't like Flint Rock. Very unhappy to hear that. However, you know, I think, thank you for council for clarifying that again, and being willing to do it yet again in the future. There's a couple things I think. One, I'd like to hear from fisheries. I think of them as they won't like this, but our science arm. I'd like to hear from them the value of Flint and Rock. And then one second point is, you know, you made a plan, it's signed. There are reasons and thought went into this. The next revision will be in a few years. So thank you. Thank you.
Are there any more questions from the advisory council? If there are not, I would like to hear from our science arms.
My name is Pat Sattler. I'm with Fish, Wildlife and Parks and the regional fish manager. And there's a lot more scientists in this room than me, so they can add detail to this. First off, this is a really important discussion, and it's one that's began when this whole program began. And I'm not sure how much biology is going to resolve it, but I'll tell you what I know. And my history and my involvement in this goes back to developing those goals of restoration of the Clark Fork, replacement of the fishery where we can't reach restoration goals, and the native fish conservation aspect. And when we were first developing this, we certainly recognized prioritizing the upper Clark Fork and Silverbow Creek where the damage happened. So we acknowledged the concern. We just had a different approach. The fish don't recognize reach A, B, and C. They're swimming throughout the whole system, and we've radio tagged fish and done other chemical analyses that show that these fish move a broad range between reaches and into the tributaries. And one of the first things we recognized was that to restore the main stem, you needed to take care of the fish in the tributaries. Further analysis showed that fish from reach B move into reach A, from C and into B. And the native fish aspect to this had limited opportunities. So we were looking at Rock Creek specifically to provide that opportunity. So we like to have Rock Creek involved in that. But yeah, the big major contributors are Warm Springs Creek, Little Blackfoot, Flint Creek. Rock Creek's a little detached from providing fish to the upper system, but we have seen connection of those others. We certainly entertain, projects. I think you've seen the dollars spent in the upper drainage. So, I think our biology is showing that, we like to keep the drainage wide as we have done, on the table, but recognize the prioritization, where the damage has occurred and do as much improvement there. And I think our science is, supporting that and identifying the locations and populations to target. I know others have more specific movement data, and we've been at this for a while. But yeah, I'll need any more clarification or detail from me, let me know. But I think that's the best I can do as far as this issue, but I'm not sure it's biological.
Before I go to another question, Brad, are you prepared to give some information as well?
Yeah, I guess if you guys want detail, Pat's given you the nice, high level look at it. I can give you more detailed data if you guys would like that.
Okay, Brad Learman.
Yeah.
Parks?
Yeah, Brad Learman. Do you want to put the slide up, Brad?
Oh, yeah.
You probably
You can some bullet points,
You might put this in. I'll move over one.
Yeah.
I get this down. Okay. So I basically spent some time last few days putting some bunch of data together that kind of shows the connection between Reach A and Reach B and C. And I'd start off by saying the brown trout fishery in the park is probably the most studied brown trout fishery in southwestern Montana. We spent a lot of time, particularly identifying, which streams fish are coming from and what areas they're using. So the bits of specific data we have, one real clean one is in 2023, we did that otolith microchemistry study that Caleb and Nathan worked on. And 4% of the fish from Reach A actually were from Flint Creek. So, we know about, that's a small sample size, but somewhere around 4% of the fish in Reach A actually were born and raised in Flint Creek. So that's a real loose number. And in 2017 study, it was only 1%. But, that's direct evidence right there. We did have a couple of brown trout out migrate from Flint Creek in 2024 that ended up in Reach A. And that was out of 8 fish. We only had 8 fish that were pit tagged that actually migrated out of Flint Creek, and 2 of them ended up in Reach A. Pit tagging, we did a bunch of pit tagging in the Clark Fork River for some other work in the Morris Ranch section, which is right at the mouth of Flint Creek, just right above it. And 27 of those brown trout actually moved up into Reach A and hit pit tag stations that Caleb and others are running. And we actually had one Westlope cutthroat trout do that too, the large, which obviously is a native fish. So we saw nice connectivity there. Obviously, Reach B and Reach B fish aren't necessarily all Flint Creek fish, but we know a lot of Flint Creek fish move down into Reach B. It's the mouth of Flint Creek. So, and even Reach C. So that generally speaks that obviously some of these fish from these drainages are moving up too and using Reach A. We did a Clark Fork telemetry study a long time ago in 2009 and 2010. And we had several fish. The connectivity between Reach C and B and A of the main stem is really clear. We see a lot of fish from Reach C move up and spawn in Reach A and Reach B. So, the tributaries are a little more, maybe it's not quite as clear, but the main stem connectivity is really clear. Those fish are moving, Reach A fish are moving through all these reaches and using all that habitat. We also did a Westlope cutthroat telemetry, a big Westlope cutthroat telemetry study in Rock Creek, but we also tagged a bunch of Clark Fork fish in Reach C. And all those fish use Rock Creek for spawning and rearing, except a couple actually went up Flint Creek too. But Rock Creek clearly provides fish to Reach C. It obviously provides some fish to Reach B and A, but we haven't really seen that in our data as much. The other thing that Pat said that I think is a clear point is that Rock Creek has a native fish population that really, it's the strongest native fish population you'll see in the Upper Clark Fork. It's, large numbers of fluvial bull trout that are moving throughout the Rock Creek system and into the Clark Fork. That, you don't see that in too many drainages in western Montana. And then also big, large fluvial cutthroat trout too that are using all of Rock Creek and the Clark Fork. And then I guess I just put one last bullet on this that, just kind of remind people that Reach C actually has the lowest densities of trout of any reaches of the 3 reaches in the Florida Fork, which I think people kind of forget because Reach A is so obviously, has so much more damage from the historic mining, that Reach C actually has some real issues too, and real low fish populations. So I think that kind of maybe helped, put things into picture a little bit too.
Like what exactly?
First of all, I want you to know this is not a criticism of the Fish and Wildlife and Parks or the NRC or any of you guys that are doing it. It's a criticism of this council since 2012 that is not properly supervised as they should and give the directions as they should. But to top that off, the staff of the NRD has not been as transparent as the council as it should have been, because we generally didn't have the information to make the decisions we had prior to making decisions. So I thank you guys for what you do. I think you've done wonders. The difference between viewed in 2010 and now is significant even there, but there is so much to do that we need to focus more on that original area on every part of their clerk work, is my opinion. I'm a shoe salesman. I'm not a master scientist on fish, so, but it's an opinion, and I think that this board has a collective of people who represent. Each of us, there's 2 of us in every county that's affected in the area. We should make the decisions and give you guys the guidance. But to do that properly, you need the information prior to having the discussion. So those are my comments. I want to thank all of you for what you do and what you've done. And what you have led, it's been a great job. But that's all I have to say, but thank you very much. And thank you, Johnny.
And just in response, Kristie Beal, Nick, I would ask if you, for our next meeting, so that we would have some thoughts on things we could do. I recognize you would like a different area to focus on, but maybe we could all also come up with some thoughts on, if we are going to give some restrictions, we need to give those in advance. We're going to say, we're not paying for staffing, or we're only paying $5 an hour for staffing, and above that, you guys figure it out. Let's put some constructive feedback into this. If we're going to put restrictions on it, let's look at it, and maybe the NRDP could give us top 12 categories of things that we end up paying for when we fund projects. Obviously, it's the construction, we get that. But if we have some data that we can look at how do we tighten our belts on this. Maureen, comment.
Madam Chairman, Maureen Connor. Yeah, I appreciate those comments. And one of the things I was going to ask for staff is NRDP staff is, it might be helpful to this council to look at an overview of where money has been spent, and it would appear that we're looking at aquatics at this time. The terrestrial, I guess that would be interesting too, but some sort of a big overview, because I'm under the impression that while there have been a couple of big infrastructure projects in Flint and Rock, I bet you I can name them all, and I bet you it's pretty minor compared to the amount that has been spent upstream. So that might help clarify. And again, what you guys are talking about is disrupting the plan that you just did. I wasn't here, but you just did it. So I'm not really in favor of that. And I kind of want to remind the council that there was a reason that the priority areas were selected. Okay, there were science reasons, biological reasons, that this is a good place to influence restoration. There are other areas that maybe could have been on there, but were essentially going to take way more money than we had. So this is the bang for the buck. And then one thing, just, I say this when I'm around people that like fish. I don't like, I mean, I love fish. They're very pretty and they swim in the water. But fish are the ultimate measurement of aquatic health. Okay? That's why we talk about fish all the time. And, you know, it's sort of interesting and sort of sometimes not, but that's why we talk about them all the time. Because when you're trying to measure stuff, if you have healthy fish population there, you know your aquatic health is good, which is what the real mandate of the council is. But there is a verge there where maybe a place isn't worth spending millions on, okay? I get that, because maybe we should have been smarter. And how can we predict this? We can't, but maybe when the original lawsuit was there, maybe we should have got way more for remedy. We didn't. So we're dealing with the fund that we have now and doing the best we can with it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Good discussion. Kristie Beal, this is a good discussion, and I think we all have things to think about and reflect on before we come upon 2028 and change the plan, if we're going to do that. Any other questions or comments from the advisory council on the what is it that is to be restored, replaced, and acquired? Any questions, comments from the public here or online?
Brian Bartkowiak, Natural Research Damage Program. Thank you, Maureen. I would point out the table 6.1 in your packet. We can work on a way of providing this in a little more digestible format, but this does have the total allocation for watershed.
Okay, good. I didn't see that. Thank you. Those charts were great, though. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, it's, Brian, it's a table, so it's not as intuitive, and we can look at ways of providing that information.
All right, I'm going to move us on to our next general topic that we put a pin in, which is Greenway. I'm going to preface this with, we are not staying here till 7:30 tonight, people, like we have before on Greenway. So let's keep our comments very focused, our questions and comments very focused, and understanding your questions and comments, what has already passed, what is already there. We can't go backwards. Although I think there might be a proposal too. So with that, I open it to questions and comments related to Greenway from the advisory council. Okay, I'll start with Steve Hill.
You know, we've heard that the railroad is impeded. And I'd like someone, Dory, to come in and explain to us what she's doing, what they are doing to overcome. If that's the reason, then let's find out why.
Kristie Beal, don't you think that'd be something she'd be willing to do? She loves coming here, asking for things. We're asking for her now.
This is Doug Martin, NRDP. I think we can, I don't believe she's online. I don't think there's anybody from the Greenway here, so.
Carl's here.
Oh, Carl's still here. But we can, yes, we can get Dory here, to give you guys an update.
Maureen Connor.
Maureen Connor, thank you, Madam Chairman. There's probably stuff that's happened there that I don't know about because time has moved on. But my reality is I'm really disappointed in this. And my memory of it is we obligated some money to the Greenway to finish because they made a good argument. They made the same argument that Butte and Anaconda made, which was don't make us come, this was under the grants program. Don't make us come back year after year and spend all this money. Let's do it in one swoop. Okay, so that's great. Okay, we did that and I come back to the council like 300 years later and I don't think anything's been done. So I'm like super disappointed. And I'm even more disappointed to hear that we're gonna spend restoration dollars in the Grand Canyon. Without their participation. So comment wise, I agree with, I would like to find out exactly what's going on with the Greenway. And when we find that out, have some discussion on, you know, perhaps encouraging a deadline on some things there. I think that's a perfectly acceptable thing to do, and I'd really like them to participate in whatever it is that's going on in, sorry, I can't help it, the Grand Canyon. I really would like to see them. They have several $1 million, and in the past, they've built like very nice infrastructure features with their money, and maybe they need to spend a little on habitat, basically. And that is a pretty cool place, the Durant Canyon. And yes, I agree, the railroads are difficult to work with. But I think we need to get, I would agree totally with the chair that we need to find out more and pretty quick. And then depending on what we find out, we may have further discussion and recommendations. Thank you. Doug.
Doug Martin with NRDP, just to clarify or add some, to provide you with some information, is that the allocation to the Greenway Service District, there were a number of components. One was ecological, and I think that's what you're talking about is the having them work with the work that Brian noted that was going on in Silverboat Creek. For the most part, Greg Mullen had led that ecological part, so Greg was doing a lot of that. What we have done in this more recent allocation is the Greenway Service District has been allocated funding only for the trail portion. And dollars were allocated to Silverboat Creek for the NRDP to lead the process to work on the ecological issues with DEQ and Fish, Wildlife, Parks and others. So the reason the Greenway Service District isn't doing that is because we have to actually move that ecological component out of their response.
Morning, Madam Chairman, thank you so much. I feel a lot better. Having said that, though, I still, and you're gonna hear me say this again on like tidying up things here as projects get concluded, but I'd really like to get a report. I mean, they're a pretty major part of what it's an important recreational facility. It's right on the creek, river, creek. It's important, and I feel like it's maybe not moving quite as fast as it could, but I don't know, so we better find facts.
And Ringside?
View. I haven't read the original plan or the 2011, 2012 update for a long time, but last night I sat down and read it. I was bleary. 2011, we gave the Greenway $8 million in 4 years to get it done. Governor Schweitzer's comment when I spoke with him was, I don't know why it's taking so damn long. It's already there. All I got to do is take up the lines and cover it with crap. And since then, we're up to, with the last 2.5 years, we gave up $23 million. And we're up to 26 years. But, and I'm stretching a little because the first agreement was 92 and then the final agreement was the Greenway. And we had the allocation agreement in 2004. But since 2004 to now, they're half done. And yes, my own personal thought, my recommendation for a discussion next time is tell them they need to finish it with grants and they better get off their butt sister.
Steve Hill.
You know, we talked about the money, we know it's being wasted. But apparently they're running into some impediments that they can't overcome. And I was like, and then when you talk to Dory, I to tell her that we're here to help her, help that program overcome the impediments and get it done. No, if we don't do that, no amount of money that we give them is gonna help. We can't just keep feeding it. So I think among the council, you know, we can maybe help her come up with some ideas on how to come the railroad, if that's the only problem. But that, I want you to express that to her. That's my intent.
Kristie, Beal, Missoula, I share all of these comments, thoughts, concerns, suggestions, and I don't know what to offer or if we need to offer something, as Steve has just indicated, because I don't know what, if anything, she's doing. I don't know. I just know we just keep shoveling money and it's not done. So my suggestion to you is to take back the message. This advisory council is sick and tired of nothing happening. And we want to see some action. And if you can't get action, we want substantiated, documented excuses. But that sound you hear in the background might be the sound of a little something being turned on. Hey. Do you have any questions for us? Anything you want to know for conveying it back?
I'm gonna choose my words carefully here, because I mean, I am a county representative on the Greenway. You know, I've been a vocal board member at times, voicing some frustrations. You know, when I first joined the board nearly 6 years ago, at that time, it was believed that there was, you know, enough funding remaining that they weren't going to need to come back for an additional request. Yes, you know, COVID threw off everything with construction dollars and implementation and, you know, inflation and whatnot.
COVID's over, Kristie Beal.
Yeah.
It's over. Let's let that excuse go and move on.
I mean, frankly, I'm not the one to try to offer defenses or excuses. I mean, I think Steve's point is excellent, that, you know, I tried to be a helpful board member in the past and be more involved. And frankly, you know, when we hear updates every couple months, every few months, you know, we hear it's issues with the railroad, but beyond that, we don't really get involved in the day-to-day. I don't know what the specific negotiation issue is as far as trying to reach that easement. And so I mean, as much as I'm deflecting, I mean, I really don't have answers or response to your looking for today.
Kristie Beal, Missoula, I hear you and I appreciate that. And here's what I would like to give to you as a board member. I can only speak for myself on this advisory council because we're not voting on anything. And anybody who wants to share in this should say so. But and Dory knows this already. I was tired of it before she came back and asked again. And I just got on here. Let's have an understanding. What is it? Today's November 5th. By December 5th, please. Everybody's emails, we're all very easy to communicate with. I would guess that Doug might even be willing to send it to us. We would like an update from the Greenway saying, here's what the problem is, and here is the Greenway's idea on how to overcome this problem or obstacle or what. And no more just dragging it along and we just pay Dory to get, I don't know what done. If anybody else want to join in that request by December 5th, I'm not open to an extension on that.
Just speaking as a board member, I think that's extremely reasonable and that's a fair and just request.
Kristie Beal, any other advisory council members that would like to join in that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Brian, Natural Resource Management Program, Carl, what is do you know when the next Greenway board meeting is?
Maybe they'll have to call one early, Kristie Beal.
So.
And Kristie Beal, I think that the NRDP and Greenway need to hear loud and clear. Every single one of the council members here said, no, let's get this done. It's 30 days. If you have to meet early, but we want something. The business of just waiting till they come around to ask for millions more again, I think that ship has sailed. Maureen Connor.
Thank you, and I agree completely, and I'm comfortable with that timeline. Hearing what, Steve said, I always love the challenge of trying to think of ideas. So like, this is what I would do if I was on that board. I would say, okay, this is a drop in the bucket. We're taking $50,000. We're sending a good lawyer to Florida to talk and negotiate and bring something back to us. I mean, that's just an idea, but accept the challenge. But I think that's something's gotta change here, because this is just not working out, and Governor Schweitzer put gravel down, that's fine, you know, make the pathway work. So I concur with what you said, and thank you.
Kristie Beal, we're not trying to dictate how they fix it, because we don't even know what it is that apparently needs to be fixed. But we need significant feedback so that we know whether we know something. And we can help if we can.
We'll send,
Done.
we'll get to you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, comments, input on Greenway from the advisory council? Public, including online? All right, is there another topic that folks would like to address for the period of time on open discussion? Steve Hill.
Steve Hill, Anaconda. One thing I'd like to ask, and I think it should be a simple thing, that when there's a report that's referring to another discussion or report, include the citation. Like any scientific journal, so that we can inform ourselves and not ask questions and ask you to explain yourself during these meetings. That takes a long time. I'm willing to read as much of the stuff, background stuff, as I possibly can, but I have no citation. That would be helpful for me.
Kristie Beal, I think that's a reasonable request, and
Brian Bartkowiak, Natural Resource Damage Program. Thank you, Steve. I did mean to mention earlier, there is a link in the AC update to Fish MT webpage that has the information on the population studies that you were asking.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. But Steve Hill, thanks, Brian.
Yes, I agree with you. That information should be easily available to just not referenced as a fish study or whatever.
Okay.
I do have two closing comments after this.
absolutely. Anything more from the advisory council? It's all yours, Brian.
Okay, two things to follow up on. For Maureen and Andy, we would like to give you our official orientation presentation. Maureen, you probably have to hear it again, but I think it's a good discussion of who we are, what we do, where we're at. No, yeah, we'll set that up with the two of you on a time that works. We will invite the rest of the council if you want to participate again. You're more than welcome to. We heard loud and clear the feedback on the email to the Greenway and a response by December 5th. And I would like us to start thinking about, I really like field trips. I think other people like field trips. I don't know if we're gonna have a action item before next fall, but I think, you know, let's start thinking about a time, maybe in the spring or summer, to get together, maybe have a follow-up discussion on some of the points today, and actually have a conversation in the field on a hopefully nice day. Those are my two follow-ups.
Kristie Beal, Missoula, I will reach out to the members who aren't here, the council members who aren't here. But I would love it if you could email me, tell me timeframe when I get here, email me with projects where you think it would be great if we could have a field trip to it, and I will coordinate with you, Brian, and we can see when would be the best time to do that. So if you could send me your thoughts on that by the end of February.
That's perfect. I was going to say that.
End of February for proposals. And we'll figure out, maybe we'll do which one ever gets the most votes. Maybe we'll do a couple of them if they're close. Maybe we'll just pick the one I like best. I'm just kidding. All right. Any more questions, comments from the council? And I want to thank you all for this dialogue. I think it's really important that we have this. Money does not grow on trees, and we need to be good stewards of it. So I appreciate all the input and everyone's patience.
Thank you, Kristie.
Any questions, comments then from public? Hearing none, I adjourn this meeting.
Yeah.